Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the library. We have a couple of spinning cogs to address. It looks like we had a collaboration the other night on Sunday morning with our friends Angry Dragon and Chibi Phoenix, and we played games. Here we go. Why am I? There we go. That's better. Yeah, I should just rearrange the order of these. Here we go. There, make myself disappear, and I left Chibi on there, so I guess Chibi will have to do the reading tonight. Too bad he doesn't know about that. There we go. We are better now. Little Yanni. It's still holidays. Better wake him. Yeah, it's like, what do we say? It's like 1 or 2 a.m. over there for them now. Our European friends. Better wake me up? No, I think I'm good. Just send me back to sleep. What could be, what, I don't see the problem in that. No problems. I am going to recalibrate my face, so there we go. That's better, hopefully. Quote, as the kids say, just, we need more quotes. Keep coming up with the same clopes. Same quotes. Why are you bonking me? And for 871 damage? Jesus. This is brutal. What did I do to you? Like, did I not compliment dinner? And like, Lord. Good Lord. What did we do? Yeah, so the collaboration. We're helping GB get started in his Space Marine 2 adventure. You lost control. Oh, that's right. I missed that. I gotta keep on. I should capitalize the lost control part, I guess, in the message. Fuck. So that must have hurt. That must have been like the little toe, right? You hit your little toe. 870 damage worth of pain because you hit your little toe. Oh, well, that's the consequences of playing with fire, Valetta. You know the risk you take. Gwen's up in the window now. She's just sniffing like crazy at the little gap. Gwen. Yeah, no. She's just like, no, I'm not doing anything. I'm innocent. Gwen. No, she's hyper fixated. I wonder if there's another cat out there. Yeah, it's still open by like an inch or something. The usual. We should probably put the couches back into their original places, original positions, if you will. Yeah. So, I think Sunday, like this coming Sunday, I think we're going to do another collaboration with Angry and Chibi, but I think the one following that one, I don't think they're not sure about their schedule. So Sundays, very much like Angry, will be very much, hey, we play Space Marines by ourselves and or with friends, and when and if they're available. And so we just have 2 people instead of, so we have 3 people instead of 2 now. That's the only difference. Yeah. There's not a whole lot else to talk about. Not working nearly as much as I should on video editing, although this will, tonight I'll do the reading stream, I guess, and I'll keep myself down to 2. So I'm down to 2 streams from 6. So actually, I guess I have been doing a good chunk of work. That's okay to say that. I have, after that, I haven't been doing as much streamer bot stuff. I did do the grab balls one. What was the command for that one? I need to put a command that lets people say, type in exclamation commands, and then the list of the commands are whispered to them or something. I think you can do that. It's not balls, although it should. Is balls maybe with, is it with like a person? Yeah, it's her. You're not there. You grab them by the you grab target user's balls. Wow. Rude. Yeah, ball check. That's right. Why don't I see that in the commands? Oh no, I clicked on the wrong thing. Okay. Ball check is a little wrong from the looks of it. And then you get the message from Gwen. This is not appropriate, Valana. You can't do that. It's not allowed. I am upset by that message, though. This one here. What is the wrong thing with it? That should be fine. Oh, I'm not actually getting target data. Okay, let me fix that. Who else gets target data? You grab target data. So let's just go. Oh no, it's like there's literally the command is right there. Add Twitch user. Get info for target. Yeah, input 0. So percentage, input 0, percentage. Okay, I'm gonna move that to the top. Save that. Okay, let's just try to do something. But still target user and not your name. I do so enjoy trying out the new commands. We gotta test them, right? But wait for orbs to show up. Orbs? I'm not sure what orbs are. Ball check. Ball check. Oh, right. It's still target user. Funny how that worked the other way around. Target user should still have been a thing. Action history. Ball check. Variables. Yeah, target is... There's no target user. No, target user still is right there. What the hell? What the fuck? Did I typo it perhaps? Target user. No? Is capital U. We're going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out because it says so. Twitch message. User grabs target user by the balls. That should just work, right? That should just work. And look at that one there. Word. No, the first word, it's there's a name for the case, but basically I like conventionally coded identifiers, essentially. Multi-word identifiers utilize a lowercase first letter, then for each word it uses a capital letter for the first letter without any spaces. So that should work. Like it works in bonk, right? So we go bonk Valena. Yeah, see, Valena underscore took damage. So if I look at bonk? User tried to bonk. Target user lost control and they took blah, blah, blah damage. Okay, so step 1 is Twitch add target info, and then the target is input 0. So that's the first word that you put in there. Gwen thinks it's okay to grab balls. I guess so. It makes sense. Do I? Oh, hang on. I'll take a look at this. Take a look at this. No, that's right. The percentage signs are in that particular field too. Oh, did I hit myself? Everyone's losing control. Outrageous. ball check. Try that again. I don't understand why it's doing that. This is going to bother me for the rest of the night. That's Twitch message, right? Twitch message. Users trying to book. Okay, those are the same. Those are the same. 404 balls not found. What on earth is the difference here? If I copy that, I put that over here into this message and go do this. What's the difference? User trying to. No, that's there. I have saved it a few times. Each time I change it. Very mysterious. I do that. I click save. Only you're not allowed to do it, apparently. This is so dumb, because honestly, this worked. This worked before. I tested this. Twitch is doing some... I don't... Gwen is working correctly, and Bonk works correctly. What if the difference is the... Well, you know, you're using the @ symbol. I'm not using the @ symbol. That shouldn't matter. Don't hit her. Poor kitty cat. And if we look at the command history, we go down to user target. Or target user, sorry. Yeah, it says Sidoen. On the last ball check. Like, that should work. It should be working. Why is it not working? That, and then... Yeah, it pulls the info. So in the action history, when we look at the command, that's fine. And it matches the same kind of pattern as the bonk command, if we're using that as an example. Does it need to know input user? Yeah, it reads the first letter, the first name, and then there's a command that says, hey, that's input 0, right? The first word after the command is input 0. And then it takes that, and the first action, the first sub action it does is it gets target info, and we feed it that input 0 as a variable, and then it goes to Twitch. It goes, okay, give me all the information on this user account. And it stores a bunch of it, right? Sort of temporarily. And then I can use that, I can use target user as sort of like the inside the message, just like I use user. So the you are the user who triggers the command, so that gets stored for this event. And in the course of messages, user grabs target user by the balls, which is supposed to fucking work. Fucking work. Damn it. It works everywhere else. Why doesn't it work for you? And it doesn't matter if you use at or not at, like the at symbol. Yeah, if it was user instead of target user, you would grab your own balls. That's right. Oh, wild talk. What a wild conversation to have with your wife. Yes, dear. You will grab your own balls. I mean, we can try that. Sure. Just give me a second, I guess. User grabs user by the balls. Let's say, okay, go ahead. Try to grab someone else by the balls. Yeah, see? That works just fine. And if we go over to action history, open this up. Yeah, input 0 is Sidoen. Target user is still, yep. Target user is still Sidoen. But it just uses the user. And that's expected too, because of the way that works. Yeah. I put in target user. And save that. So it changed it, which is good. And we're back to this nonsense. Why is it capital T? That is not supposed to be capital T. I did not put capital T. Okay. I mean, apparently I did because it was in there this time, but it wasn't the case before. Did it ever show up before? Am I just blind? Those are all the bonk commands. No, it was lowercase before too. So the capital T, I would if we use the capital T, I would expect it to not work, right? Because that's not the actual variable name. The variable name is a lowercase t. That's how the programming works. How about we try? This is a little not what I want, but go target user name. It's like grabbing you by the balls for the entire night. No, it doesn't want to use that either. Is it like complaining about having multiple things in the whatnot? As the kids say that a lot. Any special commands on here? Nope. Nothing special there. Okay, maybe what I should try doing is put a little delay in there. Maybe there's a problem that way. Yeah, we're gonna do that. We're gonna add a short delay. Because maybe the information is not coming back fast enough, and we're just gonna give it 300 milliseconds, and you'll see how that works. There. It's Twitch. Twitch is being slow. Instantly fixed it. Amazing. So the difference between bonk and ball check is bonk does a lot of things after its check, after it fetches information. It goes in, it creates a random number, it starts a logic loop to determine are you going to hit your target or are you going to hit yourself? And it goes to the if-else logic, and then it goes, okay, then we pick another random number, depending which one you're in, and then spits out another command. Today trigger hotkey by, what's this command? VTube Studio trigger. Oh, right. And then at the end of it, it tells VTube Studio to do the bonking hammer. That's right. Yeah, hooray for testing. Exactly. You have to test. So we made it work. That's like another good use for Wednesday nights, perhaps, is like we're just going to add things to StreamerBot. And we're just going to test all night long, and that's all the stream is. I could just do a random stream that way too, right? It doesn't even need to be scheduled in that case. We're testing StreamerBot crap, and that's all there is to it. But I think we've been piss farting around enough. We can probably get started reading. To the reading stream. Or a room. Yeah, it's a room, because it's totally different from this room. There we go. See? Completely different room. I might have my savings goal met. I can probably start commissioning the new reading rooms. That'd be nice, too. My eyes are getting very squinty. Oh, hello, Gwen. Funny of you to visit now at this particular moment. We are at chapter 6. Yes, we are. All right. Let's see, where are we? Here we go. Chapter 6. Beast from Air. What could that possibly mean? All right, this is just going to be bright white toxicity. There was no light left save that of the stars. When they had understood what made this ghostly noise, and Percival was quiet again, Ralph and Simon picked him up unhandily and carried him to a shelter. Piggy hung around near for all his brave words, and the three bigger boys went together to the next shelter. Hung about near for all his brave words, that's right. Gwen, you can't have the monitor. No. No, you want some attention? I know, this is like the worst time for attention, baby. But you go, scritches. Where are we? Okay. They went to the next shelter, and then there's a cattail in my way. Gwen, okay, go there, yes. They lay restlessly and noisily among the dry leaves, watching the patch of stars that was opening toward the lagoon. Okay, she's back. Come here. Come here, kitten. Here you go. Hi. Hello. No, you have to stay here now. Yeah, you get attention. That's my beard. Stop it. There you go. No. Mine. Arm jail. Can you hear the kitty cat purr? Not even then, she activated the microphone finally. Are you going to go over there now? Oh, you want the ball? Okay. Here. Get ready. You want the ball? Want the ball? On the ground. There you go. There we go. That may happen a few times, I'm afraid. She crashes into the end of the hallway. Where were you? Let's see, Alex, back up a bit. Piggy hung about near for all his brave words, and the three bigger boys went together to the next shelter. They lay restlessly and noisily among the dry leaves, watching the patch of stars that was opening toward the lagoon. Sometimes a little one cried out from the other shelters, and once a big one spoke in the dark. Then they too fell asleep. This is all happening after that wild meeting they had in the dark, that kind of when they lost control of it. Oh, there we go. She brought the ball back. Grab the ball. Okay, ready? That one didn't go as far, I'm afraid. Are you gonna bring it back? No? Okay, all done. Good girl. If she doesn't bring it back, we're done. A sliver of moon rose over the horizon, hardly large enough to make a path of light even when it sat right down on the water. But there were other lights in the sky that moved fast, winked, or went out. though not even a faint popping came down from the battle fought at 10 miles height. But a sign came down from the world of grown-ups, though at the time there was no child awake to read it. There was a sudden, bright explosion and a corkscrew tail across the sky, then darkness again and stars. What are you sniffing at? There was a speck above the island, a figure dropping swiftly beneath the parachute, a figure that hung with dangling limbs. The changing winds of various altitudes took the figure where they would. Then 3 miles up, the wind steadied and bore it in a descending curve round the sky and swept it in a great slant across the reef and the lagoon toward the mountain. The figure fell and crumpled among the blue flowers of the mountainside. But now there was a gentle breeze at this height too, and the parachute flopped and banged and pulled. So the figure, with feet that dragged behind it, slid up the mountain. Yard by yard, puff by puff, the breeze hauled the figure through the blue flowers, over the boulders and red stones, till it lay huddled among the shattered rocks of the mountain top. Here the breeze was fitful and allowed the strings of the parachute to tingle and festoon. Yeah, flare. And then a paratrooper that's unconscious, maybe? And the figure sat, his helmeted head between its knees, held by a complication of lines. When the breeze blew, the lines would strain taut, and some accident of this pull lifted the head and chest right up, so that the figure seemed to peer across the brow of the mountain. Then, each time the wind dropped, the lines would slacken and the figure bow forward again, sinking its head between its knees. So as the stars moved across the sky, the figure sat on the mountain top and bowed and sank and bowed again. Maybe it's dead. Maybe they're dead. Sorry, cat, I need my mouse. Good girl. Yeah. She's now, you're playing with me. Come on, scoot, scoot. Get off my desk then. Go sit over there. Yeah, good girl. In the darkness of early morning, there were noises by a rock a little way down the side of the mountain. 2 boys rolled out a pile of brushwood and dead leaves, 2 dim shadows talking sleepily to each other. Sounds like a plane was shot down, yeah. They were the twins, on duty at the fire. In theory, one should have been asleep and one on watch, but they could never manage to do things sensibly if that meant acting independently. And since staying awake all night was impossible, they had both gone to sleep. Now they approached the darker smudge that had been the signal fire, yawning, rubbing their eyes, treading with practiced feet. When they reached it, they stopped yawning, and one ran quickly back for brushwood and leaves. Yeah, they're not learning their lesson yet, right? But I guess that's young boys for you. Irresponsible to the point of I don't know what a consequence is. Oh, did that hurt? That must have been a consequence, and then forget about it immediately. The other knelt down. I believe it's out. He fiddled with the sticks that were pushed into his hands. No. I don't know who said no, but someone said no. He lay down and put his lips close to the smudge and blew softly. His face appeared, lit redly. He stopped blowing for a moment. Sam, give us tinderwood? Eric bent down and blew softly again till the patch was bright. Sam poked the piece of tinderwood into the hot spot, then a branch. The glow increased and the branch took fire. Sam piled on more branches. Don't burn the lot, said Eric. You're putting on too much. Let's warm up. We only have to fetch more wood. I'm cold. So am I. Besides, it's dark. All right then. Eric squatted back and watched Sam make up the fire. He built a little tent of dead wood, and the fire was safely alight. That was near. He'd have been waxy, huh? For a few moments, the twins watched the fire in silence. Then Eric sniggered. Wasn't he waxy about the fire and the pig? Luckily he went for Jack instead of us. Huh? Remember old Waxy at school? So these bastards are the ones who let the fire go out in the first place. Boy, you are driving me slowly insane. One of them said that. I don't know which one. Is it bad writing? The twins shared their identical laughter, then remembered the darkness and other things and glanced round uneasily. The flames, busy about the tent, drew their eyes back again. Eric watched the scurrying woodlice that were so frantically unable to avoid the flames and thought of the first fire, just down there, on the steeper side of the mountain, where now was complete darkness. He did not like to remember it, and looked away at the mountaintop. Warmth radiated now, and beat pleasantly on them. Sam amused himself by fitting branches into the fire as closely as possible. Eric spread out his hands, searching for the distance at which the heat was just bearable. Idly looking beyond the fire, he resettled and scattered rocks from their flat shadows into daylight contours. Just there was a big rock, and the 3 stones there, that split rock, and there beyond was a gap, just there. Sam? Huh? Nothing. The flames were mastering the branches. The bark was curling and falling away, the wood exploding. The tent fell inwards and flung a wide circle of light over the mountain top. Sam? Huh? Sam! Sam looked at Eric irritably. The intensity of Eric's gaze made the direction in which he looked terrible, for Sam had his back to it. He scrambled round the fire, squatted by Eric, and looked to see. They became motionless, gripped in each other's arms, 4 unwinking eyes aimed, and 2 mouths open. Far beneath them, the trees of the forest sighed, then roared. The hair on their foreheads fluttered, and flames blew out sideways from the fire. 15 yards away from them came the plopping noise of fabric blown open. Neither of the boys screamed, but the grip of their arms tightened and their mouths grew peaked. For perhaps 10 seconds they crouched like that while the flailing fire sent smoke and sparks and waves of inconstant light over the top of the mountain. Then, as though they had but one terrified mind between them, they scrambled away over the rocks and fled. Ralph was dreaming. He had fallen asleep after what seemed hours of tossing and turning noisily among the dry leaves. Even the sounds of nightmare from the other shelters no longer reached him, for he was back to where he came from, feeding the ponies with sugar over the garden wall. Then someone was shaking his arm, telling him that it was time for tea. Ralph, wake up! The leaves were roaring like the sea. Ralph, wake up! What's the matter? We saw the beast. Plain. Who are you? The twins? We saw the beast. Quiet, Piggy. The leaves were roaring still. Piggy bumped into him and a twin grabbed him as he made for the oblong of paling stars. You can't go out. It's horrible. Piggy, where are the spears? I can hear the... Quiet then. Lie still. Again, no clue who is saying what, very vaguely understanding that there are 2 twins, Ralph and Piggy. They lay there listening, at first with doubt, but then with terror to the description the twins breathed at them between bouts of extreme silence. Soon the darkness was full of claws, full of the awful unknown and menace. An indeterminable dawn faded the stars out, and at last light, sad and gray, filtered into the shelter. They began to stir through. Though still the world outside, the shelter was impossibly dangerous. The maze of the darkness sorted into near and far, and at the high point of the sky, the cloudlets were warmed with color. A single seabird flapped upwards with a hoarse cry that was echoed presently, and something squawked in the forest. Now streaks of cloud near the horizon began to glow rosily, and the feathery tops of the palms were green. Ralph knelt in the entrance to the shelter and peered cautiously round him. Sam and Eric, call them to an assembly. Quietly, go on. The twins, holding tremulously to each other, dared the few yards to the next shelter and spread the dreadful news. Ralph stood up and walked for the sake of dignity, though with his back prickling to the platform. Piggy and Simon followed him, and the other boys came sneaking after. Ralph took the conch from where it lay on the polished seat and held it to his lips, but then he hesitated and did not blow. He held the shell up instead and showed it to them, and they understood. The rays of the sun that were fanning upwards from below the horizon swung downwards to eye level. Ralph looked for a moment at the growing slice of gold that lit them from the right hand and seemed to make speech possible. The circle of boys before him bristled with hunting spears. He handed the conch to Eric, the nearest of the twins. We've seen the beast with our own eyes. No, we weren't asleep. Sam took up the story. By custom now, one conch did for both twins, for their substantial unity was recognized. It's good to have a legal system that allows for exceptions and flexibility where reasonable. It was furry. There was something moving behind its head, wings. The beast moved too. That was awful. It kind of sat up. The fire was bright. We just made it up. More sticks on. There were eyes, teeth, claws. We ran as fast as we could, bashing into things. The beast followed us. I saw it slinking behind the trees, nearly touched me. Ralph pointed fearfully at Eric's face, which was striped with scars where the bushes had torn him. How did you do that? Eric felt his face. I'm all rough. Am I bleeding? The circle of boys shrank away in horror. Johnny, yawning still, burst into noisy tears and was slapped by Bill till he choked on them. The bright morning was full of threats, and the circle began to change. It faced out rather than in, and the spears of sharpened wood were like a fence. Jack called them back to the center. This'll be a real hunt. Who'll come? Ralph moved impatiently. These spears are made of wood. Don't be silly. Jack sneered at him. Frightened? Course I'm frightened. Who wouldn't be? He turned to the twins, yearning but hopeless. I suppose you aren't pulling our legs. The reply was too emphatic for anyone to doubt them. Piggy took the conch. Couldn't we kind of stay here? Maybe the beast won't come near us. But for the sense of something watching them, Ralph would have shouted at him. Stay here and be cramped into this bit of the island, always on the lookout. How should we get our food? And what about the fire? Let's be moving, Jack said relentlessly. We are wasting time. No, we're not. What about the little uns? Sucks to the little uns. Someone's got to look after them. Nobody has so far. There was no need. Now there is. Piggy'll look after them. That's right. Keep Piggy out of danger. Have some sense. What can Piggy do with only one eye? The rest of the boys were looking from Jack to Ralph curiously. And another thing. You can't have an ordinary hunt because a beast doesn't leave tracks. If it did, you'd have seen them. For all we know, the beast may swing through the trees like what's its name. They nodded. So we've got to think. Piggy took off his damaged glasses and cleaned the remaining lens. How about us, Ralph? You haven't got the conch here. I mean, how about us? Suppose the beast comes when you're all away. I can't see proper, and if I get scared... Jack broke in contemptuously. You're always scared. I got the conch. Conch, conch, shouted Jack. We don't need the conch anymore. We know who ought to say things. What good did Simon do speaking? Or Bill? Or Walter? It's time some people knew they've got to keep quiet and leave deciding things to the rest of us. Oh, that encroachment of the laws being challenged right there. Valana and I had a good conversation about kind of what a major theme of the story is about, how it's about sort of, I guess, the fight between being civilized and orderly and just devolving into pure sort of animalistic instinct and behaviors, what it means to be one or the other. Yeah, we all have a voice, except some people maybe don't deserve one. Like, yeah, like, to a certain degree, that's also true. Some people don't deserve one. If you're having a conversation about a highly technical subject matter and you are not trained in that technical subject, you probably don't have a voice there, right? Why would you? You have nothing of value to add. But that's not the case here. In this particular case, everyone is involved. There is a perceived danger and it affects everybody. So this is obviously a case in which everyone's voice is equally valid. And currently there's no emergency. They are not being immediately attacked. Though perhaps they suspect they might be soon. Oh yeah, Piggy normally does have valid points, but they're valid points that are a little more mature than I think the average age group is willing to sort of tolerate. And without an adult to impose authority, I guess they kind of get ignored. And that's probably the problem here, right? Piggy is presenting ideas that are good and sensible and covering the bases, and then perhaps the lack of paying attention to that by the others who are effectively in power, you know, we're sort of well, what's the phrase? We're like shadowing potential consequences, or illustrating or pointing out the weak wisdom of the others, and why they're going to fail. Ralph could no longer ignore his speech. The blood was hot in his cheeks. You haven't got the conch, he said. Sit down. Jack's face went so white that the freckles showed as clear brown flecks. He licked his lips and remained standing. This is a hunter's job. The rest of the boys watched intently. Piggy, finding himself uncomfortably embroiled, slid the conch to Ralph's knees and sat down. The silence grew oppressive, and Piggy held his breath. This is more than a hunter's job, said Ralph at last, because you can't track the beast, and don't you want to be rescued? He turned to the assembly. Don't you all want to be rescued? He looked back at Jack. I said before, the fire is the main thing. Now the fire must be out. The old exasperation saved him and gave him the energy to attack. Hasn't anyone got sense? We've got to relight that fire. You never thought of that, Jack, did you? Or don't any of you want to be rescued? Yes, they wanted to be rescued. There was no doubt about that. And with a violent swing to Ralph's side, the crisis passed. Piggy let out his breath with a gasp, reached for it again, and failed. He lay against a log, his mouth gaping, blue shadows creeping round his lips. Nobody minded. What the hell? Let out his breath with a gasp, reached for it again, and failed. His breath? He's suffocating because of his asthma. Right, they don't understand how bad asthma is. Now think, Jack. Is there anywhere on this island you haven't been? Unwillingly, Jack answered. Yeah, he's having an attack, yeah. Not that there's much they can do about that. They don't have medicine there, and I don't know how to help someone having an asthma attack. Like, that sucks. I think the worst part is no one understands the gravity of an asthma attack. They're just, oh, he's lazy, or he can't keep his breath. He can't catch his breath or something. Like, yeah, he needs to exercise more or something. Ah, ignorance is brutal. Let's see. Unwillingly, Jack answered. There's only one. But of course, you remember the tail end part where the big rocks are all piled up. I've been near there. The rock makes a sort of bridge, but there's only one way up. And the thing might live there. All the assembly talked at once. Quite. All right. That's where we'll look. If the beast isn't there, we'll go up the mountain and look and light the fire. Let's go. We'll eat first, then go. Ralph paused. We'd better take spears. After they had eaten, Ralph and the Biggins set out along the beach. They left Piggy propped up on the platform. This day promised, like the others, to be a sunbath under a blue dome. The beach stretched away before them in a gentle curve till perspective drew it into one with the forest. For the day was not advanced enough to be obscured by the shifting veils of mirage. Under Ralph's direction, they picked up a careful way along the palm terrace, rather than dare the hot sand down by the water. He let Jack lead the way, and Jack trod with theatrical caution, though they would have seen an enemy 20 yards away. Ralph walked in the rear, thankful to have escaped responsibility for a time. Simon, walking in front of Ralph, felt a flicker of incredulity, a beast with claws that scratched and that sat on a mountain top, that left no tracks and yet was not fast enough to catch Semneric. However, Simon thought of the beast. There rose, before his inward sight, the picture of a human at once heroic and sick. He sighed. Other people could stand up and speak to an assembly, apparently, without that dreadful feeling of the pressure of personality. That's the same paragraph. Feeling of the pressure of personality could say what they would, as though they were speaking to only one person. He stepped aside and looked back. Ralph was coming along, holding his spear over his shoulder. Diffidently, Simon allowed his pace to slacken until he was walking side by side with Ralph and looking up at him through the coarse black hair that now fell to his eyes. Ralph glanced sideways, smiled constrainedly as though he had forgotten that Simon had made a fool of himself, and looked away again at nothing. For a moment or two, Simon was happy to be accepted, and then he ceased to think about himself. When he bashed into a tree, Ralph looked sideways impatiently, and Robert sniggered. Simon reeled, and a white spot on his forehead turned red and trickled. Please pay attention to where you're going, friend. Ralph dismissed Simon and returned to his personal hell. They would reach the castle sometime, and the chief would have to go forward. Jack came trotting back. We're in sight now. All right. We'll get as close as we can. He followed Jack toward the castle, where the ground rose slightly. On their left was an impenetrable tangle of creepers and trees. Why couldn't there be something in that? Because you can see, nothing goes in or out. What about the castle, then? Look. Ralph parted the screen of grass and looked out. There were only a few more yards of stony ground, and then the two sides of the island came almost together so that one expected a peak of headland. But instead of this, a narrow ledge of rock, a few yards wide and perhaps 15 long, continued the island out into the sea. There lay another of those pieces of pink squareness that underlay the structure of the island. This side of the castle, perhaps 100 feet high, was the pink bastion they had seen from the mountain top. The rock of the cliff was split, and the top littered with great lumps that seemed to totter. That doesn't sound safe to me. Oh, there's a lot of lemon in that today. Behind Ralph, the tall grass had filled with silent hunters. Ralph looked at Jack. You're a hunter. Jack went red. I know, all right. Something deep in Ralph spoke for him. I'm chief. I'll go. Don't argue. He turned to the others. You, hide here. Wait for me. He found his voice tended either to disappear or to come out too loud. He looked at Jack. Do you think? Jack muttered. I've been all over. It must be here. I see. Simon mumbled confusedly. I don't believe in the beast. Ralph answered him politely, as if agreeing about the weather. No, I suppose not. His mouth was tight and pale. He put back his hair very slowly. Well, so long. He forced his feet to move until they had carried him out onto the neck of land. He was surrounded on all sides by chasms of empty air. There was nowhere to hide, even if one did not have to go on. He paused on the narrow neck and looked down. Soon, in a matter of centuries, the sea would make an island of the castle. On the right hand was the lagoon, troubled by the open sea, and on the left, Ralph shuddered. Oh, hello, Vexing Cat. I hope your stream went well tonight. The lagoon had protected them from the Pacific, and for some reason only Jack had gone right down to the water on the other side. Now he saw the landsman's view of the swell, and it seemed like the breathing of some stupendous creature. Slowly the water sank among the rocks, revealing pink tables of granite, strange growths of coral, polyp, and weed. Down the waters went, whispering like the wind among the heads of the forest. There was one flat rock there, spread like a table, and the waters sucking down on the four weedy sides made them seem like cliffs. Then the sleeping Leviathan breathed out. The waters arose, the weeds streamed, and the water boiled over the rock table with a roar. There was no sense of the passage of waves, only this minute long fall and rise and fall. The first time I had to read the word ejaculation from a book far older than our current culture was entertaining, yes. Yeah, I didn't have the crowd to take advantage of that particular moment, but it was something. How English changes indeed. Oh dear, where was I? I had a highlight, and my highlight is now gone. Oh no, okay. At the tail end of a long paragraph, Ralph turned away to the red cliff. Okay. They were waiting behind him in the long grass, waiting to see what he would do. He noticed that the sweat in his palm was cool now, realized with surprise that he did not really expect to meet any beast and didn't know what he would do about it if he did. He saw that he could climb. Oh, thank you for the follow, Maddie. And she used the word like 11 times. I think where did I read it? What was that? That was like the second or third book we read? No, it was the Van Helsing, Dracula. It was in Dracula. They ejaculated from a building at one point. It was very disturbing. Oh, okay, where was I again? Surprising. I didn't expect, and we have ads incoming, so we might as well just take a damn break now while I find where I am again. Right at the end, though, he didn't. Yeah, there we go. He did not really expect to meet any beast, and didn't know what he would do if he did. We'll continue just after there. All right, it's not gonna. Oh, there we go. I can highlight now. from a second-story window in a castle. Yeah, that's really not the aperture you want to depart from in a major building. It seems a tad awkward. Here. I've started drinking water, or my hydration, with a little bit of concentrated lemon in it. And it seems to work really well for the throat. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go stand up for a little while. We're going to run ads. They'll be about 3 minutes, and when we get back, we will continue. We should be back now. Oh yeah. Stars just have sinus issues. Sinus issues. Yeah, that's my new theory. Yeah, they're under a lot of pressure. That's why they're angry and burny. Makes a lot of sense. I think, honestly, it made more sense when I first thought of the idea. We will run with it. Alright, where are we? Yes. He saw, that is Ralph, that he could climb the cliff, but this was not necessary. Oh, I gotta mouse over all the emotes. Yeah. It's wheezing, yeah. It's, yeah. Because they have all their gravity pulling in and only being held up by the nuclear furnace pushing out. There's a lot of pressure. The squareness of the rock allowed a sort of plinth around it, so that to the right over the lagoon one could inch along a ledge and turn the corner out of sight. It was easy going, and soon he was peering around the rock. Nothing but what you might expect. Pink, tumbled boulders with guano layered on them like icing, and a steep slope up to the shattered rocks that crowned the bastion. A sound behind him made him turn. Jack was edging along the ledge. Couldn't let you do it on your own. Ralph said nothing. He led the way over the rocks, inspecting a sort of half-cave that held nothing more terrible than a clutch of rotten eggs, and at last sat down, looking round him and tapping the rock with the butt of his spear. Jack was excited. What a place for a fort! A column of spray wetted them. No fresh water. What's that, then? There was indeed a long green smudge halfway up the rock. They climbed up and tasted the trickle of water. You could keep a coconut shell there, filling all the time. Not me. This is a rotten place. Side by side, they scaled the last height to where the diminishing pile was crowned by the last broken rock. Jack struck the near one with his fist, and it grated slightly. Do you remember? Consciousness of the bad times in between came to them both. Jack talked quickly. Shove a palm trunk under that, and if an enemy came, look. 100 feet below them was the narrow causeway, and the stony ground, and the grass dotted with heads. And behind that forest... One heave, cried Jack, exulting, and whee! He made a sweeping movement with his hand. Ralph looked toward the mountain. What's the matter? Ralph turned. Why? You were looking. I don't know why. There's no signal now. Nothing to show. You're nuts on the signal. The taut blue horizon encircled them, broken only by the mountain top. That's all we've got. He leaned his spear against the rocking stone and pushed back 2 handfuls of hair. We'll have to go back and climb the mountain. That's where they saw the beast. The beast won't be there. What else can we do? The others, waiting in the grass, saw Jack and Ralph unharmed and broke cover into the sunlight. They forgot the beast in the excitement of exploration. They swarmed across the bridge and soon were climbing and shouting. Ralph stood now, one hand against an enormous red block. A block large as a mill wheel that had been split off and hung, tottering. Somberly he watched the mountain. He clenched his fist and beat hammer-wise on the red wall at his right. His lips were tightly compressed, and his eyes yearned beneath the fringe of hair. Smoke! He sucked his bruised fist. Jack, come on! But Jack was not there. A knot of boys, making a great noise that he had not noticed, were heaving and pushing at a rock. As he turned, the base cracked and the whole mass toppled into the sea, so that a thunderous plume of spray leapt halfway up the cliff. Stop it! Stop it! His voice struck a silence among them. Smoke! A strange thing happened in his head. Something flitted there in front of his mind like a bat's wing, obscuring his idea. Smoke! I guess he's repeating this word over and over. At once the ideas were back, and the anger. We want a smoke, and you go wasting your time, you roll rocks. Roger shouted, We've got plenty of time. Ralph shook his head. We'll go to the mountain. The clamor broke out. Some of the boys wanted to go back to the beach. Some wanted to roll more rocks. The sun was bright and danger had faded with the darkness. That was one of the things that happened, remember? The day kind of has their seasons. This is the time of day in which there's bright, there's warm, there's food, there's no danger in sight, and they completely forget what the night was like, what the morning, what the promise of evening as it rolled around and things began to cool. Absolutely ignorant of the consequences or the events that happened around them. Very hyper focused in the moment, as you might expect young boys to be, or young children in general. Jack, the beast might be on the other side. You can lead again. You've been, as in you have been. We could go by the shore. There's fruit. Bill came up to Ralph. Why can't we stay here for a bit? That's right. Let's have a fort. There's no food here, said Ralph, and no shelter. Not much fresh water. This would make a wizard fort. We can roll rocks, right onto the bridge. I say we'll go on, shouted Ralph furiously. We've got to make certain. We'll go now. Let's stay here. Back to the shelter. I'm tired. No. Ralph struck the skin off his knuckles. They did not seem to hurt. I'm chief. We've got to make certain. Can't you see the mountain? There's no signal showing. There may be a ship out there. Are you all off on your rockers? Mutinously, the boys fell silent or muttering. Jack led the way down the rock and across the bridge. Chapter 7. Shadows and Tall Trees. The pig run kept close to the jumble of rocks that lay down by the water on the other side, and Ralph was content to follow Jack along it. If you could shut your ears to the slow suck down of the sea and boil of the return, if you could forget how dune and unvisited were the ferny coverts on either side, I don't remember it. I don't know at least like 3 of those words. Then there was a chance that you might put the beast out of mind and dream for a while. The sun had swung over the vertical, and the afternoon heat was closing in on the island. Ralph passed a message forward to Jack, and when they next came to fruit, the whole party stopped and ate. Sitting, Ralph was aware of the heat for the first time that day. An itchy ear. Oh, here we go. He pulled distastefully at his gray shirt and wondered whether he might undertake the adventure of washing it. Sitting under what seemed an unusual heat, even for this island, Ralph planned his toilet. He would like to have a pair of scissors and cut his hair. He flung the mask back, cut his filthy hair right back to half an inch. He would like to have a bath, a proper wallow with soap. He passed his tongue experimentally over his teeth and decided that a toothbrush would come in handy too. Then there were his nails. Ralph turned his hand over and examined them. They were bitten down to the quick, though he could not remember when he had restarted this habit, nor any time when he indulged it. Be sucking my thumb next. He looked round furtively. Apparently no one had heard that. The hunters sat, stuffing themselves with this easy meal, trying to convince themselves that they got sufficient kick out of bananas and that other olive-gray jelly-like fruit. With the memory of his sometime clean self as a standard, Ralph looked them over. They were dirty, not with the spectacular dirt of boys who have fallen into mud or been brought down hard on a rainy day. Not one of them was an obvious subject for a shower, and yet hair, much too long, tangled here and there, knotted round a dead leaf or a twig, faces cleaned fairly well by the process of eating and sweating, but marked in the less accessible angles with a kind of shadow. Clothes worn away, stiff like his own, with sweat put on, not for decorum or comfort, but out of custom. The skin of the body, scurfy with brine. He discovered with a little fall of the heart that these were the conditions he took as normal now, and that he did not mind. He sighed and pushed away the stalk from which he had stripped the fruit. Already the hunters were stealing away to do their business in the woods or down by the rocks. He turned and looked out to sea. Here, on the other side of the island, the view was utterly different. The filmy enchantments of mirage could not endure the cold ocean water, and the horizon was hard, clipped blue. Ralph wandered down to the rocks. Down here, almost on a level with the sea, you could follow with your eye the ceaseless, bulging passage of the deep sea waves. They were miles wide, apparently not breakers or the banked ridges of shallow water. They traveled the length of the island with an air of disregarding it and being set on other business. They were less a progress than a momentous rise and fall of the whole ocean. Now the sea would suck down, making cascades and waterfalls of retreating water, would sink past the rocks and plaster down the seaweed like shining hair, then pausing, gather and rise with a roar, irresistibly swelling over point and outcrop, climbing the little cliff, sending at last an arm of surf up a gully to end a yard or so from him in fingers of spray. Wave after wave, Ralph followed the rise and fall until something of the remoteness of the sea numbed his brain. Then gradually, the almost infinite size of this water forced itself on his attention. This was the divider, the barrier. On the other side of the island, swathed at midday with mirage, defended by the shield of the quiet lagoon, one might dream of rescue. But here, faced by the brute obtuseness of the ocean, the miles of division, one was clamped down, one was helpless, one was condemned, one was... Simon was speaking, almost in his ear. Ralph found that he had rock painfully gripped in both hands, found his body arched, the muscles of his neck stiff, his mouth strained open. You'll get back to where you came from. Simon nodded as he spoke. He was kneeling on one knee, looking down from a higher rock which he held with both hands. His other leg stretched down to Ralph's level. Ralph was puzzled and searched Simon's face for a clue. It's so big, I mean... Simon nodded. All the same, you'll get back all right. I think so anyway. Some of the strain had gone from Ralph's body. He glanced at the sea and then smiled bitterly at Simon. Got a ship in your pocket? Simon grinned and shook his head. How do you know then? When Simon was still, Ralph said curtly, You're batty. Simon shook his head violently till the coarse black hair flew backwards and forwards across his face. No, I'm not. I just think you'll get back all right. For a moment, nothing more was said, and then they suddenly smiled at each other. Roger called from the coverts, Come and see! The ground was turned over near the pig run, and there were droppings that steamed. Jack bent down to them as though he loved them. Ralph, we need meat even if we are hunting the other thing. If you mean going the right way, we'll hunt. They set off again. The hunters bunched, a little by fear of the mentioned beast, while Jack quested ahead. They went more slowly than Ralph had bargained for, yet in a way he was glad to loiter, cradling his spear. Jack came up against some emergency of his craft, and soon the procession stopped. Ralph leaned against a tree, and at once the daydreams came swarming up. Jack was in charge of the hunt, and there would be a time to get to the mountain. You don't think Jack actually wants to be rescued? You think he likes the freedom too much? I think there's certainly something of that here. Yeah, I agree. I think Jack has found... I think Jack certainly represents the desire he's like, if this were D&D, he would be chaotic. Good or evil, maybe neutral. He definitely represents the sort of the more instinctual side of what a human might want to do if there are no rules, if there are no consequences, if you make it up as you go along. Do what you want, when you want, why you want. Whereas going back to society means having to conform to societal standards, rules, and laws. Let's see, came up against some emergency of his craft, and soon the procession stopped. Ralph leaned against a tree, and at once the daydreams came swarming up. Jack was in charge of the hunt, and there would be time to get to the mountain. Once, following his father from Chatham to Devon... Maybe Chatham? Yeah, maybe Chatham. From Chatham to Devonport, they had lived in a cottage on the edge of the moors. In the succession of houses that Ralph had known, this one stood out with particular clarity, because after that house, he had been sent away to school. Mummy had still been with them, and Daddy had come home every day. Wild ponies came to the stone wall at the bottom of the garden, and it had snowed. Just behind the cottage, there was a sort of shed, and you could lie up there, watching the flakes swirl past. You could see the damp spot where each flake died. Then you could mark the first flake that lay down without melting, and watch the whole ground turn white. You could go indoors when you were cold, and look out of the window, past the bright copper kettle and the plate with the little blue men. They had the Blue Men group back then. That's unexpected. When you went to bed, there was a bowl of cornflakes with sugar and cream. And the books, they stood on the shelf by the bed, leaning together with always 2 or 3 laid flat on top because he had not bothered to put them back properly. They were dog-eared and scratched. There was the bright, shining one about Topsy and Mopsy that he had never read because it was about 2 girls. There was the one about the magician, which you read with a kind of tied-down terror, skipping page 27 with the awful picture of the spider. There was a book about people who had dug things up, Egyptian things. There was the boys' book of trains, the boys' book of ships, Vividly they came before him. He could have reached up and touched them, could feel the weight and slow slide with which the mammoth book for boys would come out and slither down. Everything was all right. Everything was good-humored and friendly. The bushes crashed ahead of them. Boys flung themselves wildly from the pig trap and scrabbled in the creepers, screaming. Ralph saw Jack nudge aside and fall. Then there was a creature bounding along the pig track toward him, with tusks gleaming and an intimidating grunt. Ralph found he was able to measure the distance coldly and take aim. With the boar only 5 yards away, he flung the foolish wooden stick that he carried, saw it hit the great snout and hang there for a moment. The boar's note changed to a squeal and it swerved aside into the covert. The pig run filled with shouting boys again. Jack came running back and poked about in the undergrowth. Through here. But he'd do us. Through here, I said. The boar was floundering away from them. They found another pig run parallel to the first, and Jack raced away. Ralph was full of fright and apprehension and pride. I hit him. The spear stuck in. Now they came, unexpectedly, to an open space by the sea. Jack cast about on the bare rock and looked anxious. He's gone. I hit him, said Ralph again, and the spear stuck in a bit. He felt the need of witnesses. Didn't you see me? Maurice nodded. I saw you, right bang on his snout. Whee! Ralph talked on excitedly. I hit him all right. The spear stuck in. I wounded him. He sunned himself in their new respect and felt that hunting was good after all. That's an interesting sort of political power shift. Jack was no longer the only one capable of the idea of hunting for the meat or killing. I walloped him properly. That was the beast, I think, Jack came back. That wasn't the beast. That was a boar. I hit him. Why didn't you grab him? I tried. Ralph's voice ran up. But a boar. Jack flushed suddenly. You said he'd do us. What did you want to throw for? Why didn't you wait? He held out his arm. Look. He turned his left forearm for them to see. On the outside was a rip. Not much, but bloody. He did that with his tusks. I couldn't get my spear down in time. Attention focused on Jack. That's a wound, said Simon. And you ought to suck it. Like, oh dear, Berengaria. Jack sucked. Jack does suck. Now he's sucking his wound too. I hit him, said Ralph indignantly. I hit him with my spear. I wounded him. He tried for their attention. He was coming along the path. I threw, like this. Robert snarled at him. Ralph entered into the play, and everybody laughed. Presently, they were all jabbing at Robert, who made mock rushes. Jack shouted, "Make a ring!" The circle moved in and round. Robert squealed in mock terror, then in real pain. Ow, stop it, you're hurting. The butt end of a spear fell on his back as he blundered among them. Hold him! They got his arms and legs. Ralph, carried away by a sudden thick excitement, grabbed Eric's spear and jabbed at Robert with it. Kill him! Kill him! Uh-oh. All at once, Robert was screaming and struggling with the strength of frenzy. Jack had him by the hair and was brandishing his knife. Behind him was Roger, fighting to get close. The chant rose ritually as at the last moment of a dance or a hunt. Yeah, what the hell is right? Kill the pig, cut his throat. Kill the pig, bash him in. Ralph, too, was fighting to get near, to get a handful of that brown, vulnerable flesh. The desire to squeeze and hurt was overmastering. Jack's arm came down. The heaving circle cheered and made pig-dying noises. Then they lay quiet, panting, listening to Robert's frightened snivels. He wiped his face with a dirty arm and made an effort to retrieve his status. "Oh, my bum." He rubbed his rump ruefully. Jack rolled over. "That was a good game." "Just a game," said Ralph uneasily. "I got jolly badly hurt at rugger once." "We ought to have a drum," said Maurice. "Then we could do it properly." "Oh, yeah, yeah, you need to encourage this behavior. That's exactly what you need to do." Ralph looked at him. "How properly?" "I don't know. You want a fire, I think, and a drum, and you keep time to the drum." "You want a pig," said Roger, "like a real hunt." "Or someone to pretend," said Jack. "You could get someone to dress up as a pig, and then he could act, pretend to knock me over and all that." "You want a real pig," said Robert, still caressing his rump, "because you've got to kill him." "Use a litlin," said Jack, and everybody laughed. Ralph sat up. "Well, we shan't find what we're looking for at this rate." One by one they stood up, twitching rags into place. Whatever that means. Ralph looked at Jack. "Now for the mountain." "Shouldn't we go back to Piggy," said Maurice, "before dark?" "Yeah, exactly. Yeah, boys thinking of the things they have been told native tribes do. That's right." The twins nodded like one boy. "Yes, that's right. Let's go up there in the morning." Ralph looked out and saw the sea. "We've got to start the fire again." "You haven't got Piggy's specs," said Jack, "so you can't." "Then we'll find out if the mountain's clear." Maurice spoke, hesitating, not wanting to seem a funk. "Supposing the beast's up there?" Jack brandished his spear. "We'll kill it." The sun seemed a little cooler. He slashed with the spear. "What are we waiting for?" "I suppose," said Ralph, "if we keep on by the sea this way, we'll come out below the burnt bit, and then we can climb the mountain." Once more Jack led them along by the suck and heave of the blinding sea. Once more Ralph dreamed, letting his skillful feet deal with the difficulties of the path. Yet here his feet seemed less skillful than before, for most of the way they were forced right down to the bare rock by the water, and had to edge along between that and the dark luxuriance of the forest. There were little cliffs to be scaled, some to be used as paths, lengthy traverses where one used hands as well as feet. Here and there they could clamber over wave-wet rock, leaping across clear pools that the tide had left. They came to a gully that split the narrow foreshore like a defense. That's like slippery ground, too. This seemed to have no bottom, and they peered awe-stricken into the gloomy crack where the water gurgled. Then the wave came back. The gully boiled before them, and spray dashed up to the very creeper, so that the boys were wet and shrieking. They tried the forest, but it was thick and woven like a bird's nest. In the end, they had to jump, one by one, waiting till the water sank, and even so, some of them got a second drenching. After that, the rock seemed to be growing impassable, so they sat for a time, letting their rags dry and watching the clipped outlines of the rollers that moved so slowly past the island. They found fruit in a haunt of bright little birds that hovered like insects. Then Ralph said they were going too slowly. He himself climbed a tree and parted the canopy and saw the square head of the mountain, seeming still a great way off. Then they tried to hurry along the rocks, and Robert cut his knee quite badly, and they had to recognize that this path must be taken slowly if they were to be safe. So they proceeded after that, as if they were climbing a dangerous mountain, until the rocks became an uncompromising cliff, overhung with impossible jungle, and falling sheer into the sea. Ralph looked at the sun critically. Early evening, after tea time at any rate. I don't remember this cliff, said Jack, crestfallen. So this must be the bit of the coast I missed. Ralph nodded. Let me think. By now, Ralph had no self-consciousness in public thinking, but would treat the day's decisions as though he were playing chess. The only trouble was that he would never be a very good chess player. He thought of the little uns and Piggy. Vividly, he imagined Piggy by himself, huddled in a shelter that was silent except for the sounds of nightmare. We can't leave the little uns alone with Piggy. Not all night. The other boys said nothing but stood round, watching him. If we went back, we should take hours. Jack cleared his throat and spoke in a queer, tight voice. We mustn't let anything happen to Piggy, must we? Ralph tapped his teeth with the dirty point of Eric's spear. If we go across... He glanced round him. Someone's got to go across the island and tell Piggy we'll be back after dark. Bill spoke unbelieving. Through the forest, by himself, now? We can't spare more than one. Simon pushed his way to Ralph's elbow. I'll go if you like. I don't mind, honestly. Before Ralph had time to reply, he smiled quickly, turned and climbed into the forest. Ralph looked back at Jack, seeing him infuriatingly for the first time. Jack, that time you went the whole way to the Castle Rock. Jack glowered. Yes? You came along part of this shore, below the mountain beyond there. Yes. And then? I found a pig run. It went for miles. So the pig run must be somewhere in there. Ralph nodded. He pointed at the forest. Everybody agreed sagely. All right then, we'll smash our way through till we find the pig run. He took a step and halted. Wait a minute, though. Where does the pig run go to? The mountain, said Jack. I told you, he sneered. Don't you want to go to the mountain? Ralph sighed, sensing the rising antagonism, understanding that this was how Jack felt as soon as he ceased to lead. I was thinking of the light. We'll be stumbling about. We're going to look for the beast. There won't be enough light. I don't mind going, said Jack hotly. I'll go when we get there. Won't you? Would you rather go back to the shelters and tell Piggy? Now it was Ralph's turn to flush, but he spoke despairingly out of the new understanding that Piggy had given him. Why do you hate me? The boys stirred uneasily, as though something indecent had been said. The silence lengthened. Ralph, still hot and hurt, turned away first. Come on. He led the way and set himself as by right to hack at the tangles. Jack brought up the rear, displaced and brooding. The pig track was a dark tunnel, for the sun was sliding quickly toward the edge of the world, and in the forest shadows were never far to seek. The track was broad and beaten, and they ran along at a swift trot. And the roof of leaves broke up, and they halted, breathing quickly, looking at the few stars that prickled round the head of the mountain. There you are. The boys peered at each other doubtfully. Ralph made a decision. We'll go straight across to the platform and climb tomorrow. They murmured agreement, but Jack was standing by his shoulder. If you're frightened, of course. Ralph turned on him. Who went first on the Castle Rock? I went too, and that was by daylight. All right, who wants to climb the mountain now? Silence was the only answer. Samnurk, what about you? We ought to go and tell Piggy. Yes, tell Piggy that. But Simon went. We ought to tell Piggy in case... Robert? Bill? So many... Everything there was a different word. A different person, presumably. They were going straight back to the platform now. Not, of course, that they were afraid, but tired. Ralph turned back to Jack. You see? I'm going up the mountain. The words came from Jack viciously, as though they were a curse. He looked at Ralph, his thin body tensed, his spear held as if threatening him. I'm going up the mountain to look for the beast now. Then the supreme sting, the casual, bitter word. Coming? He's being challenged now. At that word, the other boys forgot their urge to be gone and turned back to sample this fresh rub of two spirits in the dark. The word was too good, too bitter, too successfully daunting to be repeated. It took Ralph at low water when his nerve was relaxed for the return to the shelter and the still, friendly waters of the lagoon. I don't mind. Astonished, he heard his voice come out, cool and casual, so that the bitterness of Jack's taunt fell powerless. If you don't mind, of course. Oh, not at all. Jack took a step. Well then, side by side, watched by silent boys, the two started up the mountain. Ralph stopped. We're silly. Why should only two go? If we find anything, two won't be enough. Became the sound of boys scuttling away. Astonishingly, a dark figure moved against the tide. Roger? Yes? That's three then. Once more, because three is so much better than two against a quote-unquote monster. Once more they set out to climb the slope of the mountain. The darkness seemed to flow round them like a tide. Jack, who had said nothing, began to choke and cough, and a gust of wind set all three spluttering. Ralph's eyes were blinded with tears. Ashes were on the edge of the burnt patch. Their footsteps and the occasional breeze were stirring up small devils of dust. Now that they stopped again, Ralph had time while he coughed to remember how silly they were. If there was no beast, and almost certainly there was no beast, in that case, well and good, but if there was something waiting on top of the mountain, what was the use of three of them, handicapped by the darkness and carrying only sticks? Or being fools? Out of the darkness came the answer. Windy. Irritably, Ralph shook himself. This was all Jack's fault. Of course I am, but we're still being fools. If you don't want to go on, said the voice sarcastically, I'll go up by myself. Ralph heard the mockery and hated Jack. The sting of ashes in his eyes, tiredness, fear enraged him. Go on then, we'll wait here. There was silence. Why don't you go? Are you frightened? A stain in the darkness, a stain that was Jack, detached itself and began to draw away. All right, so long. The stain vanished. Another took its place. Ralph felt his knee against something hard and rocked a charred trunk that was edgy to the touch. He felt the sharp cinders that had been bark push against the back of his knee, and he knew that Roger had sat down. He felt with his hands and lowered himself beside Roger, while the trunk rocked among invisible ashes. Roger, uncommunicative by nature, said nothing. By nature. He offered no opinion on the beast, nor told Ralph why he had chosen to come on this mad expedition. He simply sat and rocked the trunk gently. Ralph noticed a rapid and infuriating tapping noise and realized that Roger was banging his silly wooden stick against something. So they sat, the rocking, tapping, impervious Roger and Ralph, fuming. Round them the close sky was loaded with stars, save where the mountain punched up a hole of blackness. There was a slithering noise high above them. the sound of someone taking giant and dangerous strides on rock or ash. Then Jack found them, and was shivering and croaking in a voice they could just recognize as his. "I saw a thing on top." They heard him blunder against the trunk, which rocked violently. He lay silent for a moment, then muttered, "Keep a good lookout. It may be following." A shower of ash pattered round them. Jack sat up. "I saw a thing bulge on the mountain." "You only imagined it," said Ralph shakily, "because nothing would bulge, not any sort of creature." Roger spoke. They jumped, for they had forgotten him. "A frog?" Jack giggled and shuddered. Some frog. There was a noise too, a kind of plop noise. Then the thing bulged. Ralph surprised himself, not so much by the quality of his voice, which was even, but by the bravado of his intention. "We'll go and look." For the first time he had first known Jack, Ralph could feel him hesitate. "Now?" His voice spoke for him. "Of course." He got off the trunk and led the way across the clinking cinders up into the dark, and the others followed. Now that his physical voice was silent, the inner voice of reason and other voices too made themselves heard. Piggy was calling him a kid. Another voice told him not to be a fool in the darkness, and desperate enterprise gave the night a kind of dentist's chair unreality. It's an interesting comparison. As they came to the last slope, Jack and Roger drew near, changed from the ink stains to distinguishable figures. By common consent, they stopped and crouched together. Behind them, on the horizon, was a patch of lighter sky, where in a moment the moon would rise. The wind roared once in the forest and pushed their rags against them. For a second, I thought that was going to be like, now the sun is starting to come up right after they just got into the night. Ralph stirred. "Come on." They crept forward, Roger lagging a little. Jack and Ralph turned the shoulder of the mountain together. The glittering lengths of the lagoon lay below them, and beyond that a long white smudge that was the reef. Roger joined them. Jack whispered, "Let's creep forward on hands and knees. Maybe it's asleep." Roger and Ralph moved on, this time leaving Jack in the rear, for all his brave words. They came to the flat top where the rock was hard to hands and knees. A creature that bulged. Ralph put his hand in the cold, soft ashes of the fire and smothered a cry. His hand and shoulder were twitching from the unlooked-for contact. Green lights of nausea appeared for a moment and ate into the darkness. Roger lay behind him, and Jack's mouth was at his ear. Over there, where there used to be a gap in the rock, a sort of hump, see? Look, Gwen, my kitty cat woke up. Hi. Go back to sleep. Ashes blew into Ralph's face from the dead fire. He could not see the gap or anything else, because the green lights were opening again and growing at the top of the mountain was sliding sideways. Because the green lights were opening again and growing, and the top of the mountain was sliding sideways. What is he doing, passing out? Once more, from a distance, he heard Jack's whisper. Scared? Not scared so much as paralyzed. Hung up there, immovable on the top of a diminishing, moving mountain, Jack slid away from him. Roger bumped, fumbled with a hiss of breath, and passed onwards. He heard them whispering. Can you see anything? There. In front of them, only 3 or 4 yards away, was a rock-like hump where no rock should be. Ralph could hear a tiny chattering noise coming from somewhere, perhaps from his own mouth. He bound himself together with his will, fused his fear and loathing into a hatred, and stood up. He took 2 leaden steps forward. And I think my kitty cat's going to sit on the carpet for a while. You gonna hop up? There you go, good girl. If I had a cat cam, you could see a kitty cat now. Behind them, the silver of the moon had drawn clear of the horizon. Before them, something like a great ape was sitting asleep with his head between its knees. Then the wind roared in the forest. There was confusion in the darkness, and the creature lifted its head, holding toward them the ruin of a face. Ralph found himself taking giant strides among the ashes, heard other creatures crying out and leaping, and dared the impossible on the dark slope. Presently, the mountain was deserted, save for the 3 abandoned sticks and the thing that bowed. Hilarious. All right, that's the end of that chapter. We are like 11 minutes out from a break, so I feel like standing up and stretching. I think it's a good place to do that. So we're going to run a few minutes of ads and take a quick little bio break. We'll be back soon. Oh, I am back. What is it with the quotes? As the kid, there's like 2 quotes that we're actually seeing. Maybe the quote thing is broken. Alright, where are we? Here we go. Chapter 8. Gift for the Darkness. Piggy looked up miserably from the drawn pale beach to the dark mountain. Are you sure? Really sure, I mean. I told you a dozen times now, said Ralph. We saw it. Do you think we're safe down here? How the hell should I know? Ralph jerked away from him and walked a few paces along the beach. Jack was kneeling and drawing a circular pattern in the sand with his forefinger. Piggy's voice came to them, hushed. Are you sure? Really? Go up and see, said Jack contemptuously, and good riddance. No fear. The beast had teeth, said Ralph, and big black eyes. He shuddered violently. Piggy took off his one round of glass and polished the surface. What are we going to do? Ralph turned toward the platform. The conch glimmered among the trees, a white blob against the place where the sun would rise. He pushed back his mop. I don't know. He remembered the panicked flight down the mountainside. I don't think we'd ever fight a thing that size. Honestly, you know. We'd talk, but we wouldn't fight a tiger. We'd hide. Even Jack'd hide. Jack still looked at the sand. What about my hunters? Simon came stealing out of the shadows by the shelters. Ralph ignored Jack's question. He pointed to the touch of yellow above the sea. As long as there's light, we're brave enough. But then? And now that thing squats by the fire as though it didn't want us to be rescued. He was twisting his hands now unconsciously. His voice rose. So we can't have a signal fire. We're beaten. A point of gold appeared above the sea, and all at once the sky lighted. What about my hunters? Boys armed with sticks. Jack got to his feet. His face was red as he marched away. Piggy put on his one glass and looked at Ralph. Now you've done it. You've been rude about his hunters. Oh, shut up. The sound of the expertly blown conch interrupted them. As though he were serenading the rising sun, Jack went on blowing till the shelters were astir, and the hunters crept to the platform, and the little uns whimpered as now they so frequently did. Ralph rose obediently, and Piggy, and they went to the platform. Talk, said Ralph bitterly. Talk, talk, talk. He took the conch from Jack. This meeting, Jack interrupted him. I called it. If you hadn't called it, I should have. You just blew the conch. Well, isn't that calling it? Ugh, take it, go on, talk. Ralph thrust the conch into Jack's arms and sat down on the trunk. I've called an assembly, said Jack, because of a lot of things. First, you know now we've seen the beast. We crawled up. We were only a few feet away. The beast sat up and looked at us. I don't know what it does. We don't even know what it is. The beast comes out of the sea, out of the dark trees. Quiet, shouted Jack. You, listen. The beast is sitting up there, whatever it is. Perhaps it's waiting. Hunting. Yes, hunting. Hunting, said Jack. He remembered his age-old tremors in the forest. Yes, the beast is a hunter, only... Shut up. The next thing is that we couldn't kill it. And the next is that Ralph said my hunters are no good. I never said that. I've got the conch. Ralph thinks you're cowards, running away from the boar and the beast, and that's not all. So now he's controlling the media. There was a kind of sigh on the platform, as if everyone knew what was coming. Jack's voice went up, tremulous yet determined, pushing against the uncooperative silence. He's like Piggy. He says things like Piggy. He isn't a proper chief. Jack clutched the conch to him. He's a coward himself. For a moment he paused and then went on. On top, when Roger and me went on, he stayed back. I went too. After, the two boys glared at each other through screens of hair. I went on too, said Ralph. And then I ran away, so did you. Call me a coward then. Jack turned to the hunters. He's not a hunter. He'd never have got us meat. He isn't a prefect, and we don't know anything about him. He just gives orders and expects people to obey for nothing. All this talk, shouted Ralph. Talk. Who wanted it? Who called the meeting? Jack turned, red in the face, his chin sunk back. He glowered up under his eyebrows. All right, then, he said in tones of deep meaning and menace. All right. He held the conch against his chest with one hand and stabbed the air with his index finger. Who thinks Ralph oughtn't to be chief? He looked expectantly at the boys ranged round who had frozen. Under the palms there was a deadly silence. Hands up, said Jack strongly. Whoever wants Ralph not to be chief. The silence continued, breathless and heavy and full of shame. Slowly the red drained from Jack's cheeks, then came back with a painful rush. He licked his lips and turned his head at an angle so that his gaze avoided the embarrassment of linking with another's eyes. How many think? His voice trailed off. The hands that held the conch shook. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. All right, then. He laid the conch with great care in the grass at his feet. The humiliating tears were running from the corner of each eye. I'm not going to play any longer. Not with you. Most of the boys were looking down now, at the grass or their feet. Jack cleared his throat again. I'm not going to be part of Ralph's lot. He looked along the right-hand logs, numbering the hunters that had been a choir. I'm going off by myself. He can catch his own pigs. Anyone who wants to hunt when I do can come too. He blundered out of the triangle toward the drop to the white sand. Jack! Jack turned and looked back at Ralph. For a moment he paused and then cried out high-pitched and raged. No! I don't do high-pitched, and I try not to do enraged when talking in a story at night, which is supposed to be, also I use ASMR tag. He leapt down from the platform and ran along the beach, paying no heed to the steady fall of his tears. And until he dived into the forest, Ralph watched him. Piggy was indignant. "I've been talking, Ralph, and you just stood there like..." Softly, looking at Piggy and not seeing him, Ralph spoke to himself. "He'll come back. When the sun goes down, he'll come." He looked at the conch in Piggy's hand. "What?" "Well, there." Sorry. Piggy gave up the attempt to rebuke Ralph. He polished his glass again and went back to his subject. "We can do without Jack Merridew. There's others besides him on this island, but now we really got a beast, though I can't hardly believe it. We'll need to stay close to the platform. There'll be less need of him and his hunting, so now we can really decide on what's what." "There's no help, Piggy. Nothing to be done." For a while, they sat in depressed silence. Then Simon stood up and took the conch from Piggy, who was so astonished that he remained on his feet. Ralph looked up at Simon. "Simon, what is it this time?" A half sound of jeering ran round the circle, and Simon shrank from it. "I thought there might be something to do, something we..." Again, the pressure of the assembly took his voice away. He sought for help and sympathy and chose Piggy. He turned half toward him, clutching the conch to his brown chest. "I think we ought to climb the mountain." The circle shivered with dread. Simon broke off and turned to Piggy, who was looking at him with an expression of derisive incomprehension. "What's the good of climbing up to this here beast when Ralph and the other two couldn't do nothing?" Simon whispered his answer. "What else is there to do?" His speech made, he allowed Piggy to lift the conch out of his hands, and he retired and sat as far away from the others as possible. Lord, I need to drink. Piggy was speaking now with more assurance and with what, if the circumstances had not been so serious, the others would have recognized as pleasure. "I said we could all do without a certain person. Now I say we got to decide on what can be done. And I think I could tell you what Ralph's going to say next. The most important thing on the island is the smoke, and you can't have no smoke without a fire." Ralph made a restless movement. "No, go, Piggy. We've got no fire. That thing sits up there. We'll have to stay here." Piggy lifted the conch as though to add power to his next words. "We got no fire on the mountain, but what's wrong with a fire down here? A fire could be built on them rocks, on the sand even. We'd make smoke just the same." "That's right. Smoke. By the bathing pool." The boys began to babble. Only Piggy could have the intellectual daring to suggest moving the fire from the mountain. "So we'll have the fire down here," said Ralph. He looked about him. "We can build it just here between the bathing pool and the platform, of course." He broke off, frowning, thinking the thing out, unconsciously tugging at the stub of a nail with his teeth. Of course, the smoke won't show so much, not be seen so far away, but we needn't go near the... The others nodded in perfect comprehension. There would be no need to go near. "We'll build the fire now." The greatest ideas are the simplest. Now there was something to be done. They worked with passion. Piggy was so full of delight and expanding liberty in Jack's departure, so full of pride in his contribution to the good of society, that he helped to fetch wood. The wood he fetched was close at hand, a fallen tree on the platform that they did not need for the assembly, yet to the others the sanctity of the platform had protected even what was useless there. Then the twins realized they would have a fire near them as a comfort in the night, and this set a few little uns dancing and clapping hands. The wood was not so dry as the fuel they had used on the mountain. Much of it was damply rotten and full of insects that scurried. Logs had to be lifted from the soil with care, or they crumbled into sodden powder. More than this, in order to avoid going deep into the forest, the boys worked near at hand on any fallen wood, no matter how tangled with the new growth. The skirts of the forest and the scar were familiar, near the conch and the shelters, and sufficiently friendly in daylight. What they might become in darkness, nobody cared to think. They worked, therefore, with great energy and cheerfulness, though as time crept by there was a suggestion of panic in the energy and hysteria in the cheerfulness. They built a pyramid of leaves and twigs and branches and logs on the bare sand by the platform. For the first time on the island, Piggy himself removed his one glass, knelt down and focused the sun on tinder. Soon there was a ceiling of smoke and a bush of yellow flame. The little ones, who had seen few fires since the first catastrophe, became wildly excited. They danced and sang, and there was a partyish air about the gathering. At last Ralph stopped work and stood up, smudging the sweat from his face with a dirty forearm. "We'll have to have a small fire. This one's too big to keep up." Piggy sat down carefully on the sand and began to polish his glass. "We could experiment. We could find out how to make a small, hot fire and then put green branches on to make smoke. Some of them leaves must be better for that than the others." As the fire died down, so did the excitement. The little ones stopped singing and dancing and drifted away toward the sea or the fruit trees or the shelters. Ralph dropped down in the sand. "We'll have to make a new list of who's to look after the fire, if you can find them." He looked round. Then for the first time he saw how few biggins there were, and understood why the work had been so hard. "Where's Maurice?" Piggy wiped his glasses again. No, he wouldn't go into the forest by himself, would he?" Ralph jumped up and swiftly ran round the fire and stood by Piggy, holding up his hair. "But we've got to have a list. There's you and me and Samnerik and—" He would not look at Piggy, but spoke casually. "Where's Bill and Roger?" Piggy leaned forward and put a fragment of wood on the fire. "I expect they've gone. I expect they won't play either." Ralph sat down and began to poke little holes in the sand. He was surprised to see that one had a drop of blood by it. He examined his bitten nail closely and watched the little glob of blood that gathered where the quick was gnawed away. Piggy went on speaking. "I seen them stealing off when we was gathering wood. They went that way, the same way as he went himself." Ralph finished his inspection and looked up into the air. The sky, as if in sympathy with the great changes among them, was different today, and so misty that in some places the hot air seemed white. The disk of the sun was dull silver, as though it were near and not so hot, yet the air stifled. "They always been making trouble, haven't they?" The voice came near his shoulder and sounded anxious. "We can do without 'em. We'll be happier now, won't we?" Ralph sat. The twins came, dragging a great log and grinning in their triumph. They dumped the log among the embers so the sparks flew. "We can do all right on our own, can't we?" For a long time, while the log dried, caught fire, and turned red hot, Ralph sat in the sand and said nothing. He did not see Piggy go to the twins and whisper to them, nor how the three boys went together into the forest. "Here you are." He came to himself with a jolt. Piggy and the other two were by him. They were laden with fruit. "I thought perhaps," said Piggy, "we ought to have a feast, kind of." The three boys sat down. They had a great mass of the fruit with them, and all of it properly ripe. They grinned at Ralph as he took some and began to eat. "Thanks," he said. Then with an accent of pleased surprise, "Thanks." "Do all right on our own," said Piggy. "It's them that haven't no common sense that make trouble on this island. We'll make a little hot fire. Rolf remembered what had been worrying him. Where's Simon? I don't know. You don't think he's climbing the mountain? Piggy broke into noisy laughter and took more fruit. He might be. He gulped his mouthful. He's correct. Simon had passed through the area of fruit trees, but today the little uns had been too busy with the fire on the beach, and they had not pursued him there. He went on among the creepers until he reached the great mat that was woven by the open space and crawled inside. Beyond the screen of leaves, the sunlight pelted down, and the butterflies danced in the middle of their unending dance. Beyond the screen of leaves, the sunlight pelted down, and the butterflies danced in the middle of their unending dance. Yes, okay. He knelt down, and the arrow of the sun fell on him. That other time, the air had seemed to vibrate with heat, but now it threatened. Soon the sweat was running from his long, coarse hair. He shifted restlessly, but there was no avoiding the sun. Presently, he was thirsty, and then very thirsty. He continued to sit. Far off along the beach, Jack was standing before a small group of boys. He was looking brilliantly happy. Hunting, he said. He sized them up. Each of them wore the remains of a black cape, and ages ago they had stood in two demure rows, and their voices had been the song of angels. We'll hunt. I'm going to be chief. They nodded, and the crisis passed easily. And then, about the beast. They moved, looked at the forest. I say this, we aren't going to bother about the beast. He nodded at them. We're going to forget the beast. That's right. Yes, forget the beast. If Jack was astonished by their fervor, he did not show it. And another thing, we shan't dream so much down here. This is near the end of the island. They agreed passionately out of the depths of their tormented private lives. Now listen, we might go later to the Castle Rock, but now I'm going to get more of the biggins away from the conch and all that. We'll kill a pig and give a feast. He paused and went on more slowly. And about the beast. When we kill, we'll leave some of the kill for it. Then it won't bother us, maybe. Oh, wow. He stood up abruptly. We'll go into the forest now and hunt. He turned and trotted away, and after a moment they followed him obediently. They spread out nervously in the forest. Almost at once Jack found the dung and scattered roots that told of pig, and soon the track was fresh. Jack signaled the rest of the hunt to be quiet and went forward by himself. He was happy and wore the damp darkness of the forest like his old clothes. He crept down a slope to rocks and scattered trees by the sea. The pigs lay, bloated bags of fat, sensuously enjoying the shadows under the trees. There was no wind, and they were unsuspicious, and practice had made Jack silent as the shadows. He stole away again, and instructed his hidden hunters. Presently they all began to inch forward, sweating in the silence and heat. Under the trees an ear flapped idly. A little apart from the rest, sunk in deep maternal bliss, lay the largest sow of the lot. She was black and pink, and the great bladder of her belly was fringed with a row of piglets that slept or burrowed and squeaked. 15 yards from the drove, Jack stopped, and his arm, straightening, pointed at the sow. He looked round in inquiry to make sure that everyone understood, and the other boys nodded at him. The row of right arms slid back. Now! The drove of pigs started up, and at a range of only 10 yards, the wooden spears with fire-hardened points flew toward the chosen pig. One piglet, with a demented shriek, rushed into the sea, trailing Roger's spear behind it. The sow gave a gasping squeal and staggered up, with 2 spears sticking in her fat flank. The boys shouted and rushed forward. The piglets scattered, and the sow burst the advancing line and went crashing away through the forest. After her! They ran along the pig track, but the forest was too dark and tangled so that Jack, cursing, stopped them and cast among the trees. Then he said nothing for a time but breathed fiercely, so that they were awed by him and looked at each other in uneasy admiration. Presently, he stabbed down the ground with his finger. There. Before the others could examine the drop of blood, Jack had swerved off, judging a trace, touching a bough that gave. So he followed, mysteriously right and assured, and the hunters trod behind him. He stopped before a covert. In there. They surrounded the covert, but the sow got away with the sting of another spear in her flank. The trailing butts hindered her, and the sharp cross-cut points were a torment. She blundered into a tree, forcing a spear still deeper, and after that, any of the hunters could follow her easily by the drops of vivid blood. The afternoon wore on, hazy and dreadful with damp heat. The sow staggered her way ahead of them, bleeding and mad, and the hunters followed, wedded to her in lust, excited by the long chase and the dropped blood. They could see her now, nearly got up with her, but she spurted with her last strength and held ahead of them again. They were just behind her when she staggered into an open space where bright flowers grew and butterflies danced round each other, and the air was hot and still. Here, struck down by the heat, the sow fell and the hunters hurled themselves at her. This dreadful eruption from an unknown world made her frantic. She squealed and bucked, and the air was full of sweat and noise and blood and terror. Roger ran round the heap, prodding with his spear whenever pig flesh appeared. Jack was on top of the sow, stabbing downward with his knife. Roger found a lodgment for his point and began to push till he was leaning with his whole weight. The spear moved forward inch by inch, and the terrified squealing became a high-pitched scream. Then Jack found the throat, and the hot blood spouted over his hands. The sow collapsed under them, and they were heavy and fulfilled upon her. The butterflies still danced, preoccupied in the center of the clearing. At last the immediacy of the kill subsided. The boys drew back, and Jack stood up, holding out his hands. Look. All he does is say one word these days, apparently. He giggled and flicked them while the boys laughed at his reeking palms. Then Jack grabbed Maurice and rubbed the stuff all over his cheeks. Roger began to withdraw his spear, and boys noticed it for the first time. Robert stabilized the thing in a phrase which was received uproariously. Right up her ass. Did you hear? Did you hear what he said? Right up her ass. This time, Robert and Maurice acted the two parts. Maurice's acting of the pig's efforts to avoid the advancing spear was so funny that the boys cried with laughter. At length, even this palled. Jack began to clean his bloody hands on the rock. Then he started work on the sow and paunched her, lugging out the hot bags of colored guts, pushing them into a pile in the rock while the others watched him. He talked as he worked. Yeah, it's true lawlessness, and that was one of the nastiest ways I've ever heard of an animal dying. Like, I'm sure there are worse, but yeah, it didn't seem nice at all. We'll take the meat along the beach. I'll go back to the platform and invite them to a feast. That should give us time. Roger spoke. Chief, how can we make a fire? Jack squatted back and frowned at the pig. We'll raid them and take fire. There must be 4 of you, Henry and you, Robert and Maurice. We'll put on paint and sneak up. Roger can snatch a branch while I say what I want. The rest of you can get this back to where we were. We'll build the fire there, and after that... He paused and stood up, looking at the shadows under the trees. His voice was lower when he spoke again. but we'll leave part of the kill for... He knelt down again and was busy with his knife. The boys crowded round him. He spoke over his shoulder to Roger. Sharpen a stick at both ends. Presently he stood up, holding the dripping sow's head in his hands. Where's that stick? Here. Ram one end in the earth. Oh, it's a rock. Jam it in that crack there. Jack held up the head and jammed the soft throat down on the pointed end of the stick, which pierced through into the mouth. He stood back, and the head hung there, a little blood dribbling down the stick. Instinctively the boys drew back too, and the forest was very still. They listened, and the loudest noise was the buzzing of flies over the spilled guts. Jack spoke in a whisper. Pick up the pig. Maurice and Robert skewered the carcass, lifted the dead weight, and stood ready in the silence, and standing over the dry blood, they looked suddenly furtive. Jack spoke loudly. This head is for the beast. It's a gift. The silence accepted the gift and awed them. The head remained there, dim-eyed, grinning faintly. Blood blackened between the teeth. All at once, they were running away as fast as they could through the forest toward the open beach. Simon stayed where he was, a small brown image, concealed by the leaves. Even if he shut his eyes, the sow's head still remained like an after-image. The half-shut eyes were dim with the infinite cynicism of adult life. They assured Simon that everything was a bad business. I know that, Simon discovered he had spoken aloud. He opened his eyes quickly, and there was the head grinning amusedly in the strange daylight, ignoring the flies, spilled guts, even ignoring the indignity of being spiked on a stick. He looked away, licking his dry lips. A gift for the beast. Might not the beast come for it? The head, he thought, appeared to agree with him. Run away, said the head silently. Go back to the others. It was a joke, really. Why should you bother? You were just wrong, that's all. A little headache, something you ate, perhaps. Go back, child, said the head silently. Simon looked up, feeling the weight of his wet hair, and gazed at the sky. Up there, for once, were clouds, great bulging towers that sprouted away over the island, gray and cream and copper-colored. The clouds were sitting on the land. They squeezed, produced moment by moment this close, tormenting heat. You know, around here, if it's been hot for a while in the spring, it's normally followed by a thunderstorm. And there's a lot of water around this island. Even the butterflies deserted the open space where the obscene thing grinned and dripped. Simon lowered his head, carefully keeping his eyes shut, then sheltered them with his hand. There were no shadows under the trees, but everywhere a pearly stillness, so that what was real seemed elusive and without definition. The pile of guts was a black blob of flies that buzzed like a saw. After a while, these flies found Simon. Gorged, they alighted by his runnels of sweat and drank. They tickled under his nostrils and played leapfrog on his thighs. They were black and iridescent green and without number, and in front of Simon, the Lord of the Flies hung on his stick and grinned. At last, Simon gave up and looked back, saw the white teeth and dim eyes, the blood, and his gaze was held by that ancient, inescapable recognition. In Simon's right temple, a pulse began to beat on the brain. Okay, so this is like the first reference to the title. Is Simon the Lord of the Flies? Is that like... No, the Lord of the Flies is the pig's head. Okay, because it's on his stick. Right. I have made this determination. This revelation has been revealed. Ralph and Piggy lay in the sand, gazing at the fire and idly flicking pebbles into its smokeless heart. Yeah, the pig head. That branch is gone. Where's Samnerik? We ought to get some more wood. We're out of green branches. Ralph sighed and stood up. There were no shadows under the palms on the platform, only the strange light that seemed to come from everywhere at once. High up among the bulging clouds, thunder went off like a gun. We're going to get buckets of rain. What about the fire? Ralph trotted into the forest and returned with a wide spray of green which he dumped on the fire. The branch crackled, the leaves curled, and the yellow smoke expanded. Piggy made an aimless little pattern in the sand with his fingers. Trouble is, we haven't got enough people for our fire. You got to treat Samnerik as one turn. They do everything together. Samninik. I guess that's a fusion of their name. Of course. Well, that isn't fair, don't you see? They ought to do 2 turns. Ralph considered this and understood. He was vexed to find how little he thought like a grown-up inside again. The island was getting worse and worse. Piggy looked at the fire. You'll want another green branch soon. Ralph rolled over. Piggy, what are we going to do? Just have to get on without them. But the fire. He frowned at the black and white mess in which lay the unburnt ends of branches he tried to formulate. I'm scared. He saw Piggy look up and blundered on. Not of the beast. I'm scared of that too, but nobody else understands about the fire. If someone threw you a rope when you were drowning, if a doctor said, take this because if you don't take it, you'll die, you would, wouldn't you? Of course I would. Can't they see? Can't they understand? Without the smoke signal, we'll die here. Look at that. A wave of heated air trembled above the ashes, but without a trace of smoke. We can't keep one fire going, and they don't care. What's more, he looked intensely into Piggy's streaming face. What's more, I don't sometimes. Supposing I got like the others, not caring, what'd become of us? Piggy took off his glasses, deeply troubled. I don't know, Ralph. We just got to go on, that's all. That's what grown-ups would do. Ralph, having begun the business of unburdening himself, continued, Piggy, what's wrong? Piggy looked at him in astonishment. Do you mean No, not it. What makes things break up like they do? Piggy rubbed his glasses slowly and thought. When he understood how far Ralph had gone toward accepting him, he flushed pinkly with pride. I don't know, Ralph. I expect it's him. Jack? Jack. A taboo was evolving around that word. Ralph nodded solemnly. Yes, he said, I suppose it must be. The forest near them burst into an uproar. Demonic figures with faces of white and red and green rushed out howling, so that the little ones fled screaming. Out of the corner of his eye, Ralph saw Piggy running. 2 figures rushed at the fire, and he prepared to defend himself, but they grabbed half-burnt branches and raced away along the beach. The 3 others stood still, watching Ralph, and he saw that the tallest of them, stark naked save for paint and a belt, was Jack. Ralph had his breath back and spoke. Well? Jack ignored him, lifted his spear and began to shout. Listen, all of you. Me and my hunters, we're living along the beach by a flat rock. We hunt and feast and have fun. If you want to join my tribe, come and see us. Perhaps I'll let you join, perhaps not. He paused and looked round. He was safe from shame or self-consciousness behind the mask of his paint and could look at each of them in turn. Ralph was kneeling by the remains of the fire like a sprinter at his mark, and his face was half hidden by hair and smut. Samnerik peered together around a palm tree at the edge of the forest. A little one howled, creased and crimson by the bathing pool, and Piggy stood on the platform, the white conch gripped in his hands. Tonight we're having a feast. We've killed a pig and we've got meat. You can come and eat with us if you like. Up in the cloud, canyons, the thunder boomed again. Jack and the two anonymous savages with him swayed, looking up, and then recovered. The little one went on howling. Jack was waiting for something. He whispered urgently to the others, "Go on now." Go on now. The two savages murmured. Jack spoke sharply, "Go on." The two savages looked at each other, raised their spears together, and spoke in time. "The chief has spoken." And the three of them turned and trotted away. Presently, Ralph rose to his feet, looking at the place where the savages had vanished. Samnerick came, talking in an awed whisper. I thought it was, and I was scared. Piggy stood above them on the platform, still holding the conch. "That was Jack and Maurice and Robert," said Ralph. "Aren't they having fun?" "I thought I was going to have asthma." I assume Piggy said that. "Sucks to your ass, Mar." To be clear, when Ralph says it, it's ass-mar. Very respectful kid. When I saw Jack, I was sure he'd go for the conch. Can't think why. The group of boys looked up at the white shell with affectionate respect. Piggy placed it in Ralph's hand, and the little uns, seeing the familiar symbols, started to come back. "Not here." He turned toward the platform, feeling the need for ritual. First went Ralph, the white conch cradled, then Piggy, very grave, then the twins, then the little uns and the others. "Sit down, all of you. They raided us for fire. They're having fun, but the..." Ralph was puzzled by the shutter that flickered in his brain. There was something he wanted to say, and the shutter had come down. But they were regarding him gravely, not yet troubled by any doubts about his sufficiency. Ralph pushed the idiot hair out of his eyes and looked at Piggy. "But the fire, of course, the fire." He started to laugh, then stopped and became fluent instead. "The fire is the most important thing. Without the fire, we can't be rescued. I'd like to put on war paint and be a savage, but we must keep the fire burning. The fire is the most important thing on the island because... He paused again, and the silence became full of doubt and wonder. Piggy whispered urgently, "Rescue." "Oh yes, without the fire we can't be rescued, so we must stay by the fire and make smoke." When he stopped, no one said anything. After the many brilliant speeches that had been made on this very spot, Ralph's remarks seemed lame, even to the little uns. At last Bill held out his hands for the conch. "Now, we can't have the fire up there. Because we can't have the fire up there, we need more people to keep it going. Let's go to this feast and tell them the fire's hard on the rest of us. And the hunting and all that, being savages, I mean, it must be jolly good fun." Samnerick took the conch. "That must be fun, like Bill says, as he's invited us to a feast. Meat. Crackling. I could do with some meat." Ralph held up his hand. "Why shouldn't we get our own meat?" The twins looked at each other. Bill answered, "We don't want to go into the jungle." Ralph grimaced. "He, goes. He's a hunter. They're all hunters, that's different." No one spoke for a moment. Then Piggy muttered to the sand, "Meat." The little uns sat solemnly thinking of meat and dribbling. Overhead, the canyon boomed again, and the dry palm fronds clattered in a sudden gust of hot wind. "You are a silly little boy," said the Lord of the Flies. "Just an ignorant, silly little boy." Simon moved his swollen tongue but said nothing. "Don't you agree?" said the Lord of the Flies. Aren't you just a silly little boy? Simon answered him in the same silent voice. Good, so Simon's going insane. Well then, said the Lord of the Flies, you'd better run off and play with the others. They think you're batty. You don't want Ralph to think you're batty, do you? You like Ralph a lot, don't you? And Piggy and Jack. Simon's head was tilted slightly up. His eyes could not break away, and the Lord of the Flies hung in space before him. What are you doing out here all alone? Aren't you afraid of me? Simon shook. There isn't anyone to help you. Only me, and I'm the beast. Simon's mouth labored, brought forth audible words. Pigs on a stick. Pig's head on a stick. Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill, said the head. For a moment or two, the forest and all the other dimly appreciated places echoed with the parody of laughter. You knew, didn't you? I am part of you. Close, close, close. I am the reason why it's no good. Why things are what they are. The laughter shivered again. Come now, said the Lord of the Flies. Get back to the others and we'll forget the whole thing. Simon's head wobbled. His eyes were half closed as he thought he were imitating the obscene thing on the stick. He knew that one of his times was coming on. The Lord of the Flies was expanding like a balloon. Yeah, definitely insane. I mean, kind of understandable. Like, this entire event would be super PTSD inducing. This is ridiculous. You know perfectly well you'll only meet me down there, so don't try to escape. Simon's body was arched and stiff. The Lord of the Flies spoke in the voice of a schoolmaster. This has gone quite far enough, my poor misguided child. Do you think you know better than I do? There was a pause. I'm warning you. I'm going to get angry, do you see? You're not wanted, understand? We are going to have fun on this island, understand? We are going to have fun on this island, so don't try it on, my poor misguided boy, or else... Simon found he was looking into a vast mouth. There was blackness within, a blackness that spread. Or else, said the Lord of the Flies. We shall do you. We shall do you, see? Jack and Roger and Maurice and Robert and Bill and Piggy and Ralph. Do you see? What? So, do you is its own sentence. I don't understand that. Do you see? Simon was inside the mouth. He fell down and lost consciousness. You've been introduced to the Lord of the Flies now. It's less imposing than I thought he would be. Chapter 9, A View to a Death. Over the island, the buildup of clouds continued. A steady current of heated air rose all day from the mountain and was thrust to 10,000 feet. Revolving masses of gas piled up the static until the air was ready to explode. By early evening, the sun had gone, and a brassy glare had taken the place of clear daylight. Even the air that pushed in from the sea was hot and held no refreshment. Colors drained from water and trees and pink surfaces of rock, and the white and brown clouds brooded. Nothing prospered but the flies who blackened their lord and made the split guts look like a heap of glistening coal. Even when the vessel broke in Simon's nose and the blood gushed out, they left him alone, preferring the pig's high flavor. With the running of the blood, Simon's fit passed into the weariness of sleep. He lay in the mat of creepers while the evening advanced and the cannon continued to play. At last he woke and saw dimly the dark earth close by his cheek. He still did not move, but lay there, his face sideways on the earth, his eyes looking dully before him. Then he turned over, drew his feet under him, and laid hold of the creepers to pull himself up. When the creepers shook, the flies exploded from the guts with a vicious note and clamped back on him again. Simon got to his feet. The light was unearthly. The Lord of the Flies hung on his stick like a black ball. Simon spoke aloud to the clearing. "What else is there to do?" Nothing replied. Simon turned away from the open space and crawled through the creepers till he was in a dusk of the forest. He walked drearily between the trunks, his face empty of expression, and the blood was dry round his mouth and chin. Only sometimes, as he lifted the ropes of the creeper aside and chose his direction from the trend of the land, he mouthed the words that did not reach the air. Do I think Simon is supposed to have had an epilepsy? I've never heard of a case where blood flowed from the nose during an epileptic attack. It's not really a blood pressure thing. Certainly people have bitten their tongues to the point of blood. That's happened. That normally comes out of your mouth, but not from the nose. And there was a comment in there about something pulsing against his brain. I think it's some kind of, I don't want to say aneurysm because that would result in death here, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what would cause a passing out and bleeding from the nose. Dry air? Stress? Although it's not very dry though, is it? It's like super humid. So we have dry air now, yes. Not a tumor, yeah, maybe. I'm not a doctor though, so tumor's as good a guess as any. Presently, the creepers festooned the trees less frequently, and there was a scatter of pearly light. Oh, another thing, I believe this is not his first time, right? It really sounded like this is episodic, and he's endured this kind of episode before. There was a scatter, here we go, pearly light from the sky down through the trees. This was the backbone of the island, the slightly higher land that lay beneath the mountain where the forest was no longer deep jungle. Here there were wide spaces interspersed with thickets and huge trees, and the trend of the ground led him up as the forest opened. He pushed on, staggering sometimes with his weariness, but never stopping. The usual brightness was gone from his eyes, and he walked with a sort of gloomed determination, like an old man. A buffet of wind made him stagger, and he saw that he was out in the open, on rock, under a brassy sky. He found his legs were weak, and his tongue gave him pain all the time. When the wind reached the mountain top, he could see something happen, a flicker of blue stuff against brown clouds. He pushed himself forward, and the wind came again, stronger now, cuffing the forest heads till they ducked and roared. Simon saw a humped thing suddenly sit up on the top and looked down at him. He hid his face and toiled on. The flies had found the figure too. The lifelike movement would scare them off for a moment so that they made a dark cloud round the head. Then as the blue material of the parachute collapsed, the corpulent figure would bow forward, sighing, and the flies settled once more. Simon felt his knees smack the rock. He crawled forward, and soon he understood. The tangle of lines showed him the mechanics of this parody. He examined the white nasal bones, the teeth, the colors of corruption. He saw how piteously the layers of rubber and canvas held together the poor body that should be rotting away. Then the wind blew again, and the figure lifted, bowed, and breathed foully at him. Simon Simon knelt on all fours and was sick till his stomach was empty. Then he took the lines in his hands. He freed them from the rocks and the figure from the wind's indignity. At last he turned away and looked down at the beaches. The fire by the platform appeared to be out, or at least making no smoke. Further along the beach, beyond the little river, and near a great slab of rock, a thin trickle of smoke was climbing into the sky. Simon, forgetful of the flies, shaded his eyes with both hands and peered at the smoke. Even at that distance, it was possible to see that most of the boys, perhaps all of the boys, were there. So they had shifted camp then, away from the beast. As Simon thought this, he turned to the poor broken thing that sat stinking by his side. The beast was harmless and horrible, and the news must reach the others as soon as possible. He started down the mountain and his legs gave beneath him. Even with great care, the best he could do was a stagger. See, that would suggest something like a seizure. Like when I have a grand mal seizure, my legs and limbs are useless to me. And yeah, his tongue hurt, that implies biting your tongue. My tongue is horrible for 2 weeks after one of those. But the nosebleed is very different to me. It's very new to me. Bathing, said Ralph. That's the only thing to do. Piggy was inspecting the looming sky through his glass. I don't like them clouds. Remember how it rained just after we landed? Going to rain again. Ralph dived into the pool. A couple of little ones were playing at the edge, trying to extract comfort from a wetness warmer than blood. Piggy took off his glasses, stepped primly into the water, and then put them on again. Ralph came to the surface and squirted a jet of water at him. Mind my specs, said Piggy. If I get water on the glass, I got to get out and clean 'em. Ralph squirted again and missed. He laughed at Piggy, expecting him to retire meekly as usual in the pained silence. And in the pained silence. Oh my goodness. Expecting him to retire meekly as usual and in pained silence. Instead, Piggy beat the water with his hands. Stop it, he shouted. Do you hear? Furiously, he drove the water into Ralph's face. All right, said Ralph. Keep your hair on. Piggy stopped beating the water. I got a pain in my head. I wish the air were cooler. I wish the rain would come. I wish we could go home. Piggy lay back against the sloping sand side of the pool. His stomach protruded and the water dried on it. Ralph squinted up at the sky. One could guess at the movement of the sun by the progress of a light patch among the clouds. He knew the water. He knelt in the water and looked around. Where's everybody? Piggy sat up. Perhaps they're lying in the shelter. Where's Samnerick? And Bill? Piggy pointed beyond the platform. That's where they've gone, Jack's party. Let them go, said Ralph uneasily. I don't care. Just for some meat, and for hunting, said Ralph wisely, and for pretending to be a tribe, and putting on war paint. Piggy stirred the sand under water and did not look at Ralph. Perhaps we ought to go too. Ralph looked at him quickly, and Piggy blushed. I mean, to make sure nothing happens. Ralph squirted water again. Long before Ralph and Piggy came up with Jack's lot, they could hear the party. There was a stretch of grass in a place where the palms left a wide band of turf between the forest and the shore. Just one step down from the edge of the turf was the white, blown sand of above high water, warm, dry trodden. Hang on. Just one step down from the edge of the turf was the white, blown sand of above high water, warm, dry trodden. That's the sentence. Dry trodden what? Like you forgot a word. Ground? Sand? The edge of the turf with blown sand of yeah, I'm moving on. We're canceling that sentence. That entire sentence is just worthless. Below that again was a rock that stretched away toward the lagoon. Beyond was a short stretch of sand and then the edge of the water. A fire burned on the rock and fat dripped from the roasting pig meat into the invisible flames. All the boys of the island, except Piggy, Ralph, Simon, and the two tending the pig, were grouped on the turf. They were laughing, singing, lying, squatting, or standing in the grass, holding food in their hands. But to judge by the greasy faces, the meat-eating was almost done, and some held coconut shells in their hands or were drinking from them. Before the party had started, a great log had been dragged into the center of the lawn, and Jack, painted and garlanded, sat there like an idol. There were piles of meat on green leaves near him, and fruit and coconut shells full of drink. And by drink, we mean water here. I don't think they've managed a distillery just yet. Piggy and Ralph came to the edge of the grassy platform, and the boys, as they noticed them, fell silent one by one, till only the boy next to Jack was talking. Then the silence intruded even there, and Jack turned where he sat. For a time he looked at them, and the crackle of the fire was the loudest noise over the droning of the reef. Ralph looked away, and Sam, thinking that Ralph had turned to him accusingly, put down his gnawed bone with a nervous giggle. Ralph took an uncertain step, pointed to a palm tree, and whispered something inaudible to Piggy, and they both giggled like Sam. Lifting his feet high out of the sand, Ralph started to stroll past. Piggy tried to whistle. Very casual, I guess. At this moment, the boys who were cooking at the fire suddenly hauled off a great chunk of meat and ran with it toward the grass. They bumped Piggy, who was burnt, and yelled and danced. Immediately, Ralph and the crowd of boys were united and relieved by a storm of laughter. Piggy once more was the center of social derision, so that everyone felt cheerful and normal. Jack stood up and waved his spear. "Take them some meat." The boys, with the spit, gave Ralph and Piggy each a succulent chunk. They took the gift, dribbling, so they stood and ate beneath the sky of thunderous brass that rang with the storm coming. Jack waved his spear again. "Has everybody eaten as much as they want?" There was still food left, sizzling on the wooden spits heaped on the green platters. Betrayed by his stomach, Piggy threw a picked bone down on the bench. A picked bone down on the beach and stood for more. Jack spoke again impatiently. "Has everybody eaten as much as they want?" His tone conveyed a warning. Given out to the pride of ownership, and the boys ate faster while there was still time. Seeing there was no immediate likelihood of a pause, Jack rose from the log that was his throne and sauntered to the edge of the grass. He looked down from behind his paint at Ralph and Piggy. They moved a little further off over the sand, and Ralph watched the fire as he ate. He noticed, without understanding, how the flames were visible now against the dull light. Evening was coming, not with calm beauty, but with the threat of violence. Jack spoke. "Give me a drink." Henry brought him a shell, and he drank, watching Piggy and Ralph over the jagged rim. Power lay in the brown swell of his forearms. Authority sat on his shoulder and chattered in his ear like an ape. "All sit down." The boys ranged themselves in rows on the grass before him, but Ralph and Piggy stayed a foot lower, standing on the soft sand. Jack ignored them for the moment, turned his mask down to the seated boys, and pointed at them with a spear. "Who's going to join my tribe?" Ralph made a sudden movement that became a stumble. Some of the boys turned toward him. "I gave you food," said Jack, "and my hunters will protect you from the beast. Who will join my tribe?" "I'm chief," said Ralph, "because you chose me, and we were going to keep the fire going. Now you run after food. You ran yourself, shouted Jack. Look at that bone in your hands. Ralph went crimson. I said you were hunters. That was your job. Jack ignored him. Who'll join my tribe and have fun? I'm chief, said Ralph tremulously. And what about the fire? And I've got the conch. You haven't got it with you, said Jack, sneering. You left it behind, see? Clever. And the conch doesn't count at this end of the island. All at once the thunder struck. Instead of the dull boom, there was a point of impact in the explosion. The conch counts here too, said Ralph. All over the island. What are you going to do about it then? Ralph examined the rank of boys. There was no helping them, and he looked away confused and sweating. Piggy whispered, the fire. Rescue. Who'll join my tribe? I will. Me. I will. I'll blow the conch, said Ralph breathlessly, and call an assembly. We shan't hear it. Piggy touched Ralph's wrist. Come away. There's going to be trouble, and we've had our meat. The wiki says he's supposed to be epilistic. Yeah, okay, well then, sure. I mean, it's mostly in target with what I know, and I don't know everything. Like, your morals can't mean anything if you're also willing to eat when hungry? Yeah, like, the world's not black and white, right? And it's very interesting the way the political power has been sort of organized. And it's not really any different from the way they started. Everyone, quote unquote, chose Ralph. Well, they chose Ralph against Jack. So yeah, they chose Ralph against Jack, but that's because Ralph had performed already. He organized people. He offered them something, which is not a bad reason to give someone power. Jack is offering meat, which is very satisfying to a starving, hungry group of boys, and fun. Whereas Ralph is saying, hey, fruit's good enough, and you're pooping all over the place because of it, and we also have to work so that we can be a little comfortable. But the reality is, during the daytime, everything's fine. There's no need to work. There's no need to prepare for anything. It's at nighttime when everyone's scared, but that goes away again in the morning. So why should we do what Ralph wants? And Ralph is offering hard labor in the sense of maintaining a fire in a cooperative, organized way that requires a little bit of discipline that they're no longer required to have because Ralph isn't an adult. And holy crap, we have ads. So that came up on me like a surprise. All right, we'll leave it here for the time being. We'll do our ads, and we'll be back in a few moments. How we have returned. Where are we? Oh, let's see. Ralph said he'll call an assembly. Presumably Jack said we shan't hear it. And Piggy touches Ralph's wrist. Come away. There's going to be trouble and we've had our meat. There was a blink of bright light beyond the forest, and the thunder exploded again so that a little end started to whine. Big drops of rain fell among them, making individual sounds when they struck. Going to be a storm, said Ralph, and you'll have rain like when we dropped here. Who's clever now? Where are your shelters? What are you going to do about that? The hunters were looking uneasily at the sky, flinching from the stroke of the drops. A wave of restlessness set the boys swaying and moving aimlessly. The flickering light became brighter, and the blows of the thunder were only just bearable. The little ones began to run about, screaming. Jack leapt onto the sand. Do our dance. Come on, dance. He ran stumbling through the thick sand to the open space of rock beyond the fire. Between the flashes of lightning, the air was dark and terrible. and the boys followed him clamorously. Roger became the pig, grunting and charging at Jack, who sidestepped. The hunters took their spears, and the cooks took spits, and the rest clubs of firewood. A circling movement developed and a chant. While Roger mimicked the terror of the pig, the little uns ran and jumped on the outside of the circle. Piggy and Ralph, under the threat of the sky, found themselves eager to take a place in this demented but partly secure society. They were glad to touch the brown backs of the fence that hemmed in the terror and made it governable. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. The movement became regular, while the chant lost its first superficial excitement and began to beat like a steady pulse. Roger ceased to be a pig and became a hunter, so that the center of the ring yawned emptily. Some of the little uns started a ring on their own, and the complementary circles went round and round, as though repetition would achieve safety of itself. There was a throb and stamp of a single organism. The dark sky was shattered by a blue-white scar. An instant later the noise was on them like the blow of a gigantic whip. The chant rose a tone in agony. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. Now, out of the terror rose another desire, thick, urgent, blind. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. Again the white-blue scar jagged above them, and the sulphurous explosion beat down. The little uns screamed and blundered about, fleeing from the edge of the forest, and one of them broke the ring of Biggins in his terror. Him! The circle became a horseshoe. A thing was crawling out of the forest. It came darkly, uncertainly. The shrill screaming that rose before the beast was like a pain. The beast stumbled into the horseshoe. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood. The blue-white scar was constant, the noise unendurable. Simon was crying out something about a dead man on a hill. Kill the beast, cut his throat, spill his blood, do him in. They added that suddenly, I think. The sticks fell, and the mouth of the new circle crunched and screamed. The beast was on its knees in the corner, its arms folded over its face. It was crying out against the abominable noise, something about a body on the hill. The beast struggled forward, broke the ring, and fell over the steep edge of the rock to the sand by the water. At once the crowd surged after it, poured down on the rock, leapt onto the beast, screamed, struck, bit, tore. There were no words, and no movements but the tearing of teeth and claws. And the clouds opened and let down the rain like a waterfall. The water bounded from the mountaintop, tore leaves and branches from the trees, poured like a cold shower over the struggling heap on the sand. Presently, the heap broke up, the figures staggered away. Only the beast lay still, a few yards from the sea. Even in the rain they could see how small a beast it was, and already its blood was staining the sand. Now a great wind blew the rain sideways, cascading the water from the forest trees. On the mountaintop, the parachute filled and moved. The figure slid, rose to its feet, spun, swayed down through a vastness of wet air, and trod with ungainly feet the tops of the high trees. Falling, still falling, it sank toward the beach, and the boys rushed screaming into the darkness. The parachute took the figure forward, furrowing the lagoon, and bumped it over the reef and out to sea. Toward midnight, the rain ceased and the clouds drifted away, so that the sky was scattered once more with the incredible lamps of stars. Then the breeze died too, and there was no noise save the drip and trickle of water that ran out of clefts and spilled down, leaf by leaf, to the brown earth of the island. The air was cool, moist and clear, and presently even the sound of the water was still. The beast lay huddled on the pale beach, and the stains spread inch by inch. The edge of the lagoon became a streak of phosphorescence, which advanced minutely. As the great wave of the tide flowed, the clear water mirrored the clear sky and the angular bright constellations. The line of phosphorescence bulged about the sand grains and little pebbles. It held them each in a dimple of tension, then suddenly accepted them with an inaudible syllable and moved on. Along the shoreward edge of the shallows, the advancing clearness was full of strange, moonbeam-bodied creatures with fiery eyes. Here and there, a larger pebble clung to its own air and was covered with a coat of pearls. The tide swelled in over the rain-pitted sand and smoothed everything with a layer of silver. Now it touched the first of the stains that seeped from the broken body, and the creatures made a moving patch of light as they gathered at the edge. The water rose farther and dressed Simon's coarse hair with brightness. The line of his cheek silvered, and the turn of his shoulder became sculptured marble. The strange attendant creatures, with their fiery eyes and trailing vapors, busied themselves round his head. The body lifted a fraction of an inch from the sand, and a bubble of air escaped from the mouth with a wet plop. Then it turned gently in the water. Somewhere, over the darkened curve of the world, the sun and moon were pulling, and the film of water on the Earth planet was held, bulging slightly on one side while the solid core turned. The great wave of the tide moved farther along the island, and the water lifted. Softly, surrounded by a fringe of inquisitive, bright creatures, itself a silver shape beneath the steadfast constellations, Simon's dead body moved out toward the open sea. That's dark. Chapter 10. Mind you, actually there are like, I think 3 chapters left. We're on 10. What do we have? That was the thing, by the way. Yeah, I kind of figured it might be. There are 12 chapters. Maybe we should leave these last 3 for... because we only have an hour. I don't think we're going to get through 3 chapters in 1 hour. So we can save this for Monday. I think that's what we'll do, and just end it. We'll have a couple of short reading streams, I suppose. That'll make life a little easier for video editing, I suppose. But yeah, I think we'll do that. So we're going to end there. We are at chapter 10. But don't laugh. I mean, that's a dark place to end. That's actually not a bad place to end, I think. Everyone can walk away with the depressed understanding that a little boy who tried to warn them, who tried to bring them enlightenment, was put down and slaughtered in confusion and darkness. Yeah, time for that to sink in. There's a lot of meaning in all this as what's happening. These boys are turning into savage animals, and it certainly seems inevitable that it's going to continue to go that way. Yeah. Grim and dark. Alright. We are, let's see, today's a Monday. Next time I stream is a Wednesday. And that's going to likely be mucking about in Monster Hunter Wilds. But who knows? Thursday. Yeah, right, Thursday. I keep forgetting I moved my Wednesdays to my Thursdays. So yeah, Thursdays. And then Fridays is Space Marines, and we will begin. I've decided I will do the Vanguard Prestige ranks, or Prestige Peregrination after that. And on Sunday, I believe we are once again collaborating with Angry Dragon and Chibi Phoenix, the Chibi Phoenix, to continue Chibi's progress through the campaign and hopefully get the two of them addicted to this game along with myself. That'd be great. Is there someone I can raid? Would be great if some of my friends who are currently listening were streaming instead. Check out the chaos of the first half of that campaign. Yeah, I think the first few chapters are indeed posted. We can do that. You can do that. Read that. Listen to that, I guess, as opposed to read it. Or go read the book too. You can do that too. We can take a quick look, I think. So look, one book or stream doesn't end. You'll be there for a while, won't you? I was reading a quick conversation on Reddit the other day about rating people you don't know or something. I'm like, how do you meet new people if you don't rate people you don't know? There's a couple of people who've just started too, which is kind of nice. I'll go for the person who's been on for like 11 minutes first, I think. Oh, scroll up. Okay, let's see. You have a followers only chat, so we're not gonna do that. Okay. See, I'm checking these things now. These are important to me. I don't want to dive into a stream that says followers only. Starting a book. There's like leftist book club. I don't want to get into that either. Oh, hello, kitty cat. I just had a cat jump up on top of me. I am looking, still looking. Oh, there's a person reading The King in Yellow. They've been up for, I think that means an hour 20. That's a pretty good one. How about you? Are you read only? No, you're not. It looks like you're actually doing something. All right. Cool. Let's check this out then. Day 6. Awesome. Cool. Well, everybody, thank you for listening. I hope you've had a good night. I hope half of you at least fell asleep. And we can move on from here. I can right click that. All right. As usual, before you leave, please do remember to return your reading material to the shelves and be kind to one another.